Chapter 80. Apples had high nutritional value and were rich in minerals and vitamins. They were mild, sweet, and slightly sour. They could stimulate saliva and quench thirst, clear away heat, and improve digestion. Of course, there was also a weak effect of nourishing the brain, nourishing the blood, and calming the mind. However, after being converted by Kettle, this part of the effect was amplified. There were many magic potions with similar functions, but it was impossible to make such a delicious magic potion with just one apple. It was also at this time Dake suddenly realized that the kettle worm in this world might not have the ability to extract juice. Otherwise, the streets would be filled with juices. I'll find a chance to go to the library tomorrow and check it out. Dake continued his experiment. This time, he used oranges. 3 oranges, 3 cups of orange juice. Remember, https://m. Vipkanchu. VIP. The little fiend drank first as a sign of respect. Then its face turned green and it rushed into the toilet. There was the sound of water, and when it came out again, it was refreshed. Dake did not touch the other 2 cups of orange juice. Finally, he picked 3 pears and put them into Kettle's shell to quickly dissolve and ferment them. The 3 cups of pear juice that he obtained smelled sweet and refreshing. Without Dake's order, the little fiend drank one of the cups in one gulp. Then, it suddenly narrowed its eyes and stood still for a long time. Dake asked, "How is it?" The little fiend said, "It's getting cold, this society." Dake was speechless. He picked up a cup of pear juice and took a sip. He did feel that his throat was a little cold and there was a strange refreshing feeling in his lungs. Clearing heat, stopping coughing and moistening the lungs? It tastes like rock sugar and pear. So, Dake wrote in his notebook, apple juice nourishes the brain and refreshes the mind. Orange juice stimulates the appetite. Pear juice reduces heat and clears the lungs. Why does it feel like an old Chinese doctor? After Dake finished writing, he was amused. Kettle's ability was indeed powerful. It could ferment all kinds of fruits into juice with special effects. However, the fruits used in the experiment were all ordinary fruits. The special effects extracted were not particularly strong. This weekend, he could go to Traveler's Street and pick some fruits with special effects to ferment. Perhaps he could get some fruit juice that was comparable to a magic potion. In addition, the fruit that the catgrass was about to bear could also be fermented. These were all points that could be considered. After concluding, Doc nodded his head in satisfaction. Then, he looked at the remaining 4 cups of fruit juice. It seems that Luo C said that he has indigestion. Maybe it's because he ate too much beef with Deanna. Yes, Deanna gets sleepy when she reads at night, and she gets heaty when she eats too much beef. 2 cups for each of us. Dake didn't think too much about it. He found a plate and went out with 4 glasses of juice. Deanna's room was 233, and Luo C's room was 234. They were easy to remember. It was Dake's first time entering the women's dormitory. He felt that even the floor was cleaner than the men's. Fortunately, it was already past 9 o'clock at night, and there was not a single person in the corridor. Dake arrived at room 233 first and knocked on the door. "Who is it?" A soft voice came from inside the room. "It's me." Dake stood outside the door and waited for a while before Deanna opened the door with a red face. She looked up at Dake and whispered, "It's so late. Why did you suddenly come here?" Dake smiled and moved the plate down. "I made a few extra glasses of juice." "Oh, really?" Deanna twisted the corner of her nightgown with her fingers and moved back slightly, revealing a gap in the door. "Come in then. Is it appropriate?" Dake didn't want to go in, but since he was already here, he might as well take a seat. After all, they were close friends on campus. They were both dormitories of the same size, but Deanna's room was much narrower than Dake's. She must have used a lot of credits to decorate her room. Not only were the walls covered with pink wallpaper, but the corners and shelves of the room were also covered with teddy bears of various sizes. One of the black and white teddy bears with bows on its ears was particularly eye-catching. Isn't that Anna's familiar? Dake glanced at the panda familiar that was forced to wear a floral dress and suddenly felt that he was quite nice to this little monster. At least it didn't have to wear a dress. Dake put down the plate, picked up a glass of orange juice and apple juice, and moved it to the desk. There was also a half-completed exercise book on the desk. It seemed that Anna was having a fierce battle with them just now. Orange juice. It's good for the stomach, but don't drink too much. Apple juice. It's refreshing. Drink some when you're sleepy. Anna leaned over and sniffed, then returned the orange juice to Dake. I don't need this. Dake. Okay, that's true. Then, Anna picked up the apple juice and drank it. After a while, her eyes lit up and she suddenly felt a lot clearer. It's here. It's here. I'm in the zone. Dake smiled. Do you want pear juice? It's good for clearing heat. Hee hee. Anna rolled her eyes and pointed next door. Give it to Luo-si. She's having a lot of heat. Dake nodded. Then I'll go. Anna. Okay. Then, Dake knocked on Luo-si's door again. Luo-si opened the door and stuck her head out. When she saw Dake, she invited him in. She was wearing a white nightgown. Her belly was slightly bulging and her lips were dry and cracked. Obviously, she had eaten too much beef and hadn't digested it yet. Dake left the orange juice and pear juice for her. After returning to the dormitory, Dake looked at the orange juice left by Luo-si and considered whether to drink it or not. In the end, he chose to drink it. Needless to say, after coming out of the bathroom, he felt a lot more refreshed. Apple juice and pear juice are good things. I can always have some in the future. The calendar turned over. During the dual class of the first period on Tuesday, Professor Cheong-si learned that the first-year students had created new magical fairies yesterday, so she selected a few students to demonstrate their skills on stage. With all kinds of new magical fairies, the battles between the students were much more interesting than when they only had fantasy beasts. Someone suggested that they hold an in-class competition like last time. However, Professor Cheong-si said that it wasn't time yet. Magical fairy cards were the biggest category among the 5 major categories of magical cards. The next in-class competition would be held after most of the students had created their first magic card or item card. As for the venue card and the mystic card, they were extremely advanced content. She didn't expect the first-year students to learn it in the first semester. After this class, White came as scheduled and returned the 1 credit that she owed to Dake yesterday. The hero's son was always enthusiastic when it came to returning the money. Dake accepted the 1 credit and thought about how to create a magic card or item card. Maybe I can use the fermented juice from kettle as the core material. Monthly votes. Chapter 81. There was no need to wait for the professors to teach. After Dake had an idea, he went straight to the library after the history of magic in the afternoon. Soon, he found a book called Pierre Explains to You in Person: How to Refine Magic Potions into Magic Cards. Pierre was a very famous potion chemist in the history of magic. From his point of view, there was no magic potion that couldn't be refined into a magic card. This explanation book was as thick as 3 fingers, making people feel intimidated just by looking at it. Not to mention the first-year students, even the senior students rarely had the courage to take it down from the bookshelf. After Dake took it down, he suddenly remembered that he still had a problem to solve. He temporarily put it on the table in the reading room and used his shoulder bag to occupy the space. He then continued to search through the bookshelf. Soon, he found an illustrated handbook about insects and flipped through it to the description of the kettle pot bug. The description in the book was relatively brief, but it roughly wrote down everything that should be written. The kettle pot bug was a rare magic fairy that didn't exist in this world. It could only be refined by chance. In fact, most of the kettle pot bug were white cards and had no skills. The rarer blue cards had at most the passive skill, sturdy. The first website was https://m vipkanchu VIP. There was no skill like power trick at all. The card name of the kettle pot bug was called Kettle Pot Bug. It had a one-word difference with Dake's kettle pot. Perhaps it was this one-word difference that made these two magic fairies that looked exactly the same have different life forms. Coupled with the activation of the Big Sin series of magic cards, it led to the kettle pot having the special ability to ferment fruits into juice. In other words, his kettle pot was absolutely unique. After resolving the doubts in his heart, Dake returned to the reading room. He suddenly noticed that someone was flipping through the extremely long Pierre Explains to You in Person book in the seat he occupied. He walked over and tapped the table lightly. Cough, cough, cough. Emma raised her head and glanced at him. Then, she quietly closed her book and returned to her seat. Dake pretended that nothing had happened and began to study. The beginning of the book explained the difference between magic potions and magic potions that had been refined into magic cards. After being refined into a magic card, the potion would be classified into a magic card and an item card according to the different forms, but the actual effect would not be too different. The existing magic potions were generally one-time use, and would be gone after drinking them. After being refined into a magic card, it became a reusable magic potion card. However, the drawback of the magic potion card was that its effects would be weakened and would not last long. For example, a potion that could restore 10 points of magic power per second after being refined into a potion card might only restore 10 points of magic power per use. The advantage of the magic potion card was that it was easy to use, easy to carry around, and could be used repeatedly. Of course, the more precious the potion, the more difficult it would be to refine it into a magic potion card. Without sufficient skill, one might lose everything. For an archmage, if they wanted to use magic potions in a duel, they had to refine the magic potion into a magic potion card. Learning how to make magic potion cards was something every mage had to go through. From that afternoon onwards, Dake began to read slowly and put other things aside for the time being. However, Anna began to ask him for apple juice every day. Luo C, on the other hand, had developed a strong interest in pear juice. Apple juice could refresh the brain and was suitable as a learning drink. Moreover, it tasted good. Dake could understand why Anna would ask him for apple juice, but what the hell was pear juice? He knew that it could reduce heat, but he could not be heaty every day, right? It was not until Luo C told him that it could reduce heat, detoxify, and prevent pimples that he finally understood. But was it really effective? Dake expressed that he did not understand. There was a limit to what a person could do, so he did not continue to pursue it. In the blink of an eye, it was Friday. After the dual class in the morning, the students were looking forward to the trip to Travelers Street again. There was only a week left before Halloween, and more people began to care about their costumes for the masquerade ball. The upperclassmen were even contacting their partners for the ball. The Halloween ball was not as romantic as the Christmas ball, and there was also the usual ghost hunting activity. In the past, it was not very popular among couples. However, it was different this time. The princess of the kingdom was scheduled to attend, and the style of the ball had been raised from a strange masquerade event to another dimension. There were even students who announced on the spot that this time, they had to wear the most formal costumes and transform into the prince who was most compatible with the princess. The goal was to dance with the princess. As for how he was ridiculed by others, that was another matter altogether. In short, those funny and strange costumes were not as popular as last year. Instead, outfits such as the Vampire series, the Knight series, the Palace series, and other outfits that could show off the beauty and temperament of the person wearing the costume became more popular. The male and female students also started to have other ideas because of the gradually romantic atmosphere. They began to look for a dance partner. The first-year students did not have the advanced awareness of the upperclassmen, and it would take a few more days for it to explode. At this time, Dake entered Travelers Street to look for suitable fruit ingredients. Travelers Street was filled with fruit shops, but they were really shops that sold pears and apples. Of course, he would also buy some apples and pears to bring back, but his main goal now was the fruits with special effects. For example, the legendary dragon saliva fruit. Just kidding. Even if there really was one, Dake couldn't afford it. He first went to the Wind Traveler material shop. But not long after, he walked out again. Wind Traveler did have all sorts of ingredients, but the only thing that was related to fruits was dried fruit. And it was known that dried fruit had no juice. After leaving the Wind Traveler, Dake strolled around the street for a while before entering the Goo Bird Flower and Wood Shop where he had previously bought the worm tree. Buying fruit from a flower and wood shop sounded very unreliable. However, in the golden autumn season, there were many flowers and trees in the shop that bore fruit. As the boss, the fat auntie clearly remembered the first-year student who could afford the worm tree. When Dake asked, she smiled and said, "I can sell it, but the fruit is part of the value of the flowers and trees. If you buy the fruit, won't my flowers and trees be hard to sell?" Dake also smiled and said, "But the fruit is ripe, so it has to be picked. I only need to buy 1 or 2 that are picked or dropped." "Fat auntie, that's not a lot. Maybe there isn't what you want?" "Dake, I can take a look. Today, even if I die and am nailed to the coffin, I will write the remaining 3 chapters in the tomb. Before 6 p.m. Chapter 82. The fat auntie was obviously biased towards Dake. However, for a first-year student who was studious, polite, and had a cute and handsome face, how could he not be liked? She waved at Dake and walked to the counter. Dake came to the counter and saw her carrying a basket from below. The basket wasn't big and there were only 5 fruits in it. Dake didn't know much about plants, so he couldn't tell what kind of plants these fruits came from. However, it wasn't shameful to not know, but it was shameful to pretend to know. Therefore, he asked curiously, "Auntie, what kind of plants do these fruits come from and what are their effects?" The fat auntie reached into the basket and pulled 3 fruits together. She said, "These 3 are the fruits of the singing tree." The singing tree was a type of bonsai that could make a sound when the sun shone on it. It was said to be a green alarm clock that was very suitable to be kept in the dormitory. However, this was the first time Dake knew that the singing tree could produce fruits. He remembered the website, Vipkanshu. The 3 fruits were only the size of a longan and looked like 3 large blueberries. However, what were the special effects of the singing tree's fruits? Could they make people learn how to growl? Dake raised his head and looked at the fat auntie. The fat auntie smiled and said, "You first-year students might not have learned that the singing tree's fruits are actually one of the core materials of the mute card. They can absorb sound waves." Dake thought about it and said, "That can't be right. If the singing tree's fruits can absorb sound waves, then wouldn't the singing tree be unable to make any sound after it grows fruits?" The fat auntie shook her head and said, "On the contrary, after it grows fruits, the singing tree's sound will become louder. It will absorb sound waves and store them before exploding again." Dake still didn't understand, but the fat auntie obviously didn't want to continue. She took out one of the remaining 2 fruits and placed it on the table. This fruit looked like a pineapple but was only the size of a palm. The fat auntie said, "This is the fruit of the spiral tree." Dake was confused and said, "Spiral tree? What kind of tree is that?" The fat auntie pointed at one of the small trees in the shop. Dake looked over. It was a strange little tree with a spiral trunk. Its leaves curled up like wind chimes, and as the wind blew, they emitted a chime-like sound. "So why don't you just call it the wind chime tree?" The fat auntie said, "Applying the leaves of the spiral tree on the root of the ear can effectively prevent the symptoms of dizziness. Currently, the best-selling car sickness sticker was made with the leaves of the spiral tree as the main material. Its fruit, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. It can make people drunk even without wine, and make the world spin." Dake was instantly interested in the pineapple-like fruit. The fat auntie picked up the last fruit. It was a translucent fruit the size of a citrus. Upon closer inspection, one could even see the core of the fruit. The fat auntie said, "This is the fruit of the worm tree." Dake was shocked. Can a worm tree bear fruit? Of course. The fat auntie explained with a smile. However, it requires a very special method to grow its fruit. Its fruit is very rare and can store a person's temporary memory. It can be released as long as a little magic is injected. It is a natural memory ball. There were 3 chirping tree fruits, 1 spiral tree fruit, and 1 worm tree fruit. There were a total of 5 fruits. Among them, the chirping tree fruit was the cheapest, only 10 credits each. The spiral tree fruit was slightly more expensive, 30 credits each. As for the worm tree fruit, its price was actually equivalent to half a worm tree. Although Dake had credits, he couldn't spend them recklessly. In the end, he didn't buy the worm tree fruit. Instead, he spent 60 credits on the other 4 fruits. The main reason was that he couldn't imagine what the fruit of the worm tree could do after being fermented into juice. If he wanted to store memories, wasn't there a worm tree planted there? Getting another fruit of the worm tree was really superfluous. On the other hand, the chirping tree fruit and the spiral tree fruit seemed to be quite useful. After leaving the cuckoo bird flower shop, Dake began to walk around again. There were many areas in Traveler Street that weren't open to first-year students. This was mainly because first-year students still didn't have a complete understanding of magic. If they were exposed to too many dangerous things, it would only be harmful. Dake walked around and finally found a magic potion shop. Not only did the magic potion shop sell ready-made magic potions, but it also sold some of the ingredients for making magic potions. Naturally, it involved fruits, herbs, and the like. Moreover, the fruits here were clearly priced and had detailed information written on them. Dake picked a few whitewood fruits and blue fruits. The whitewood fruit was one of the core ingredients for making healing plasters. The blue fruit was the raw material for making the magic recovery potion. In Professor Thompson's magic classes, Dake used the blue fruit to make the magic recovery potion and magic recovery potion. He even kept the potions made in those 2 classes in the dormitory. Once he learned how to make magic potions into magic cards, he would prioritize those 2 potions for experimentation. The whitewood fruit and the blue fruit were 20 credits each, which was a discounted price for students. He bought 5 of each. Dusk was approaching, and the sky was slightly dark. Dake carried bags of various sizes and returned with a full load. There were many people around him who returned with a full load, but they were all loaded with candy, snacks, clothes, and jewelry. Of course, there were also people like A.I. Ma, who let 2 poor otters help carry 2 piles of books. When Dake returned to the castle, he happened to meet Anna, who was full and ready to go shopping with Luo-Si. Just as Dake opened his mouth, Anna quickly said, it's done, all the homework is done. Then it's fine. Dake watched their backs disappear into the distance like a kind old father. After returning to the dormitory, Dake sorted out a bunch of things and organized them for about half an hour before he summoned the kettle to ferment a cup of apple juice and took a sip. Slightly refreshed, Dake couldn't wait to take out the whistling tree fruit. There were a total of 4 fruits. Among them, the effects of the whitewood fruit and the blue fruit were predictable. Only the whistling tree fruit and the spiral tree fruit were still in suspense. He was curious about the effects of these 2 fruits if they were fermented into juice. Among them, there were 3 whistling tree fruits, which had more room for error. It was just right for the first experiment. In the end, a whistling tree fruit the size of a longan took a full 15 minutes to ferment. In order to complete the fermentation of the whistling tree fruit, Dake had to continuously replenish Kettle's magic. When he finally succeeded, he couldn't help but sigh in relief. Then he smiled and looked at the little devil that was about to sneak away. Chapter 83. A longan-sized singing tree fruit could only produce a small cup of juice after being dissolved and fermented. The juice was dark blue and didn't look like it could be drunk by humans. Fortunately, the little fiend wasn't human. Dake couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. The little fiend was forced to fly back. It lowered its head and carefully took a sip of the juice in the small cup. There was a hint of sweetness. With this thought in mind, the little fiend unknowingly drank the entire cup of Songshu fruit juice. How do you feel? The little fiend was very touched by Dake's late concern. It turned around and said. Dake couldn't help but wonder, what did you say? Little demonic beast. Remember in 1 second. https://m. Vipkanchu. VIP Dake. Oh? The little fiend. Dake. Why don't you say it? The little fiend. Dake, if you don't say it, How would I know what you want to say? The little fiend. In short, the little fiend couldn't make a sound. Dake, of course, immediately realized the problem. He glanced at the clock and noted the time. Without the little fiend, Dake obviously wouldn't do any random experiments. He picked a book and read for a while. It wasn't until the little fiend suddenly let out a "ah" sound that he got up to record the time. Will it last for about 8 minutes? Should I say that it's really one of the materials to make the mute card? SSS, if I use this juice according to the method of making the potion card, can I find another way to make a different mute card? As long as one was a first-year student, there wasn't a single person who wasn't envious of Professor Shi Erfu's mute card. That kind of boldness that could make everyone quiet down with a wave of his hand was just too cool. It was a pity that making the mute card was a skill that only seniors could learn. Whether it was the technical difficulty or the quality of the materials, the requirements were very high. Among the first-year students, even Dake was self-aware. He didn't even think about touching that level of refining. However, he seemed to have a chance now. With that thought in mind, Dake carefully stored the remaining 2 singing tree fruits away. Although the singing tree fruit wasn't expensive, most of the singing tree fruits that could be bought on Traveler Street were dried fruits that had been processed, unless one went to a florist's shop to try their luck. After that, Dake extravagantly took out a spiral fruit that cost 30 credits each for an experiment. The spiral fruit took about 15 minutes to ferment. Fortunately, Dake had mastered the mana replenishing technique, otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to brew it. The juice of the spiral fruit tree had a strange black and white color. It would swirl with a slight stir. A spiral fruit finally fermented into a cup of juice. Seeing that there was only 1 cup of black and white juice, Dake thought for a moment before scooping a spoonful with a silver spoon and passing it to the little fiend. Dake. Ah. The little devil beast. Ah. A spoonful went down his stomach. The little demonic beast extended its claws and spiraled into the sky. Dake poked its belly, and it giggled. Dake let out a sigh of relief and asked, "How is it? Are there any abnormalities?" The little devil beast. Hee. Dake. The little devil beast. Hee. All right, this time it was the ears. Dake felt that he had discovered the secret of the spiral fruit tree. The little devil beast's hearing impediment lasted for about 2 minutes before it recovered. Dake confirmed the effects of the 2 tree juices and wrote in his notebook, "Singing tree juice, unable to make a sound. Spiral tree juice. Hearing impediment. Drinking the 2 juices together is both deaf and mute." Dake looked at the cup of spiral tree juice and thought about how to preserve it. Apart from that, he couldn't help but think that if the 2 juices were mixed together, would the effects be lost? Or would it be both? Should I try again? He did as he thought. Dake took another singing tree fruit and let kettle dissolve and ferment it into juice. Then, he took a spoonful of both juices and put it into another small cup and mixed it carefully. After the black and white juices mixed with the dark blue juices, there was no color fusion. Instead, it presented a wonderful liquid of black, white, and blue. After being forced to take a bite, the little demon beast became a deaf-mute beast for real. The effects seemed to be stronger as it lasted for a full 5 minutes. Dake suddenly realized something. Then, he looked at the remaining amount of the 2 juices and fermented the last singing tree fruit into juice. This way he could try to achieve a 1:1 ratio. After that, he mixed the 2 juices, covered it with a lid and put it aside for the time being. It was already 8:30 at night. Dake knew that it was time to put what he had learned to use. Without a suitable preservation method, the shelf life of the 2 juices wouldn't be long. The best way was to use it while it was hot and directly make it into a magic potion card. Of course, he wasn't so bold as to use it for his first experiment of making a magic potion card. With the dried white fruit and the blue fruit, it wouldn't be their turn either. Anyway, the first step was to put the dried white fruit or the blue fruit into Kettle's shell. But at this moment, Dake, who had just completed a small fusion, suddenly had some distracting thoughts. He put a dried white fruit and a blue fruit into Kettle's shell. The 2 fruits dissolved and fermented in the shell at the same time and finally formed a mixed liquid. Dake first used Pride Eye to make the little devil beast arrogant and let it use small dart to consume its magic power. Then, he scooped out a spoonful of the mixed juice and fed it. After absorbing this spoonful of mixed juice, the little devil beast did feel its magic power quickly recovering. As for the other half of the healing effect, it didn't show up yet. But this was enough for Dake. He didn't want to become a fatty in one bite. After that, he took out Pierre personally explains it to you, and started experimenting step by step according to the method recorded in the book. There were many ways to make a magic potion card. If you had to break it down, every magic potion had a different way of making it. What Dake tried was naturally the common method recorded in the book. To be more precise, it was the common method of making mana recovery potion into a magic potion card. Imitating this method and replacing mana recovery potion with mixed juice was Dake's current idea. The creation of a magic potion card was completely different from the magic elven card. From the beginning, it didn't need elven honey, brain lobe essence, and other life cultivation bases. Its core was a type of refining array number 3 called the Dalton refining array. Dalton was a great grand mage, second only to Merlin, who created a new era of transforming magic potions into magic potion cards. Chapter 84. Apart from the core alchemy array number 3, the energy cycle combination of alchemy arrays number 21, number 33, and number 34 was basically used as the core to transform the magic potion into a magic potion card. The most common method of making it was to first pour the magic potion into the magic pen and use it as a pigment. When the sorcerer wrote the magic language on the blank magic card, they would use the most gentle method to gradually transform the surface nature of the blank magic card into the nature of the magic potion. This would achieve the final compatibility with the magic potion and greatly increase the success rate of making the magic potion. The so-called magic language belonged to the knowledge that would only be taught in the second year. It was a bit like computer language. Before the second year, the sorcerer could only copy the template to achieve the goal of making the magic potion. They could not wait until they had mastered the magic language, and then compile it in their own way. What Dake could do now was, of course, copy. 33 minutes later, Dake looked at the circle of light of the alchemy array on the magic card and knew that he had successfully advanced to the final step. Thanks to his steady fingers and spirit, he had not made any mistakes in the steps of the drawing so far. The first website was https://m Vipkanchu. VIP. The last step was to pour the magic potion into the circle of light formed by the alchemy array number 3. Up until now, the mixed juice made from one dried white fruit and one blue fruit each was only left with more than 1/2 and less than 2/3. He did not know if the mixed juice was enough, so he was a little nervous. But the facts showed that it did not even need that much. He only needed to pour 1/2 of the 2 cups of mixed juice into the alchemy array, and the final fusion began. At this step, external forces could no longer interfere. It relied entirely on the half-formed magic card to make the self-modulation. If the modulation was successful, it would be a success. If the modulation failed, there was a probability that it would turn into an inferior or mutated magic potion card. But most of them would still be a GG. The most direct visual manifestation at this time was the light of the alchemy array that kept flashing on the magic card. The whole process of making the magic potion only truly ended when the light completely subsided. Therefore, he waited for about 3 minutes. Dake's breathing almost stopped when the self-modulation of the magic card was finally completed. He lowered his head to look at the surface of the magic card. Probably because the entire refining process was relatively perfect, the surface of the card was quite clean. Next to a round flask filled with potion, there was a test tube with blue and white liquid. It should be an item card, right? Dake frowned slightly. After refining a potion into a potion card, whether it was a magic card or an item card, the most direct indication was whether there was a container on the card surface. With a container, it belonged to the category of props. In the process of using the item cards, the magic guide fairies had to go through a process of taking. From this point of view, magic cards were more convenient. However, it was not as stable as item cards. It could only be said that each had its own pros and cons. In the name of Dake Dimming, I summon you. At the same time, a bottle of blue and white magic potion appeared in the air. Card name, Energy Potion Type. Prop effect. Restores 200 energy points after consumption. It wasn't a mana recovery potion, but an energy potion. The mana recovery potion card, which could restore 100 points of magic power, became an energy potion card, which could restore 200 points of magic power. In addition, after using it once, it also needed to replenish its magic power, or wait for it to restore its magic power to full before it could be used again. All in all, Dake was quite satisfied. Next, he still didn't make the mixed juice of the screeching tree fruit and the spiral tree fruit magic card. Instead, he made another energy potion to practice. After he was proficient enough, he changed to the most basic method of refining a potion into a potion card and began to try to make the deaf-mute potion. With the previous 2 practice sessions and time to drink a cup of apple juice, Dake finally succeeded in refining the deaf-mute potion. Card name, Mute Potion Type. Prop effect. After consumption, no sound can be heard, and no sound can be made. Lasts for 120 seconds. In a duel, 120 seconds was more than enough. Dake seemed to be quite happy. The so-called consumption here could be taken orally or externally. Externally, it could be directly smashed on the opponent's body to take effect. One could imagine how pitiful and helpless the magic guide fairies would be after being smashed by the mute potion. Yes, just like the little evil magic beast now. However, the little evil magic beast had already learned the secret skill, lying dead. As long as it lay on the table and waited for the potion's effect to subside, it would be a good demon again. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Asterisk. The experiment was finally over. Dake summoned the trash slime to help deal with the residue of the experiment. After that, he washed his body and practiced the underworld magic on the bed for an hour before lying down to sleep. The next day, perhaps because he slept late last night, Dake felt a little tired. He climbed onto the deck chair on the balcony and watched the outfit changer, while conserving his energy. Just like that, 2 hours passed. Dake was preparing to review and consolidate the experiment data from last night when there was a knock on the door. To him, this was a very rare occurrence. Since entering the school, there was really no one who had the ability to knock on the door. The main thing was that he always left one step ahead of others and didn't give them much of a chance. Who is it? It's me, the lovely Deanna. It's the gluttonous Deanna. Dake opened the door helplessly and saw Deanna and Luosi standing at the door. He asked, "What's the matter?" Deanna looked at him and invited, "Aren't you going to buy a costume for Halloween?" Luosi agreed, "It's time." Dake thought of his crudely made nightgown and nodded. There was only a little more than a week until Halloween, so it was time to prepare. He didn't want to be the laughing stock of the masquerade party. "Then let's go together." Deanna immediately showed a sunny smile. Dake suddenly felt a little dazzled, so he said, "Wait a minute, I'll go change." At around 8:30, the 3 entered Traveler's Street through the pavilion in the middle of the lake. Deanna curiously asked, "Dake, do you have a target in mind?" Dake, Deanna, I mean, the costume you like. Dake thought for a while and said, "Just buy a decent dress?" Deanna nodded seriously, "The dress is also not bad. But I recommend the Prince of Darkness outfit from the Velvet store." Dake, "The Prince of Darkness is more like it. Forget about the Prince of Darkness." Deanna, Dake, I'm kidding. Let's go and have a look. Reach the 5th update of the 2nd, please vote. Chapter 85. Saturday morning, people came and went. C. Keat walked among the crowd with a gloomy expression. He was a second-year student, and as a pure-blooded noble, he had been assigned to the noble house. But that was all in the past. Last year, on the 2nd month of his enrollment at the Shang Malian Academy, his family had fallen into a difficult situation due to his father's political defeat. From a noble to a lowly commoner, the huge psychological drop had caused C. Keat's heart to become twisted. The Shang Malian Academy would not rearrange students based on their family's circumstances. C. Keat had become his family's only hope. He had also become the only commoner in his year at the noble house. Even though his classmates never talked about it due to the etiquette of nobility, they must be laughing at him behind his back, right? With this thought in mind, C. Keat gradually stuffed himself into a cold, pitch-black leather jacket. He remembered the URL. Vipkanchu. VIP. His father had frantically sent him letters through a clerk at Travelers Street, allowing him to finally understand what kind of burden he was carrying on his young shoulders. Becoming a qualified magister could change his family's circumstances. Even if he wasn't a noble, he could still live a good life. If he could become an outstanding magister, he might even be able to return to the noble circle. His mother would always send her voice to him through magic letters, calling his name over and over again. C. Keat. C. Keat. C. Keat. C. Keat collapsed under the double pressure of internal and external pressure. When one was young, the family's upheaval could indeed allow some people to grow up in an instant, but not every 12-year-old could bear such a heavy burden. C. Keat did not grow up according to his parents' expectations. Instead, he fell into a rut. His grades became worse and worse, and his temper became stranger and stranger. Until Christmas Eve last year, when the girl he had always had a crush on responded to an invitation from a senior and became his partner at a romantic ball. As a result, he escaped from the youthful scene and rushed into the deepest part of the castle. At that time, the person who had extended an olive branch to him was the leader of the church. Found him. C. Keat's gaze pierced through the gaps between people and finally caught sight of the heretic who was hugging women in his left and right arms. Velvet clothing shop. Dake was pulled into the crowd by D. Anna. He never would have thought that the shop's business would be so good before 9 o'clock. Perhaps this was the legendary, reputable store. If he had come by himself, he would have definitely gone to another shop after seeing so many people. But in reality, most people like to squeeze into shops with more people. Perhaps it was because of a crowd mentality, or perhaps it was because they believed that a shop shops. Soon. Doc was pulled to a corner of the shop and stood in front of a mannequin. He could not help but ask, "The Prince of the Night Prince set?" Diana nodded her head like a chicken pecking at rice. But Dake's was not that the quality of the Prince of the Night Prince was not good, but the quality was too good, to the point of exaggeration. The material was black velvet, the collar was made of Snow Mountain black fox fur, and there was a fluffy foxtail at the back. The 2 rows of buttons were made of obsidian, and there were even opals on the shoulders. Could the feather cape on the shoulders be the feather of the black raven? That was an ominous symbol of the night. Even though this set of clothing had different shades of black, it gave off a very high-class feeling. But in the end, it could not escape the fact that it was all black. If he walked on the stage of Christmas wearing such a costume, he would instantly become the focus of the stage. Dake did not want to be so eye-catching. And this, the half-face black raven mask. However, Diana excitedly pointed at the black raven mask that was studded with black diamonds on the table next to her. Dake could not help but be speechless. Is this thing for people to wear? Which country's prince would dare to dress like this? This is not a world derived from dating games. Dake thought of the only eldest prince of the kingdom. That guy did seem to have this style of dressing. So the people's aesthetic had been led astray by him? Dake's eyes flashed, and suddenly his eyes lit up as he found a reason to refuse. Hiss. He sucked in a breath of cold air. 399 credits. At this price, it seemed that the obsidian, opals, and black diamonds were all products of magical technology. But for a first-year student, it was still an unattainable price. I'd rather buy caterpillar fruit than buy this thing. Thinking of this, Dake prepared a speech and was about to open his mouth to refuse. But D. Anna suddenly smiled proudly and pulled him in front of another model at the back. Look, the Princess of the Night suit. Dake's eyelids twitched. This black velvet princess dress on the female model was indeed worthy of the Prince of the Night suit of the same name. Not only was it full of all kinds of exaggerated decorations, but it was also full of frills, as if the more frills there were, the more princess-like it was. Dake was just about to open his mouth to say something. Anna pointed at one of the labels. 50% discount for couples outfits. Dake's eyelids twitched. Good girl, so this is what you were waiting for? On the other side, Luo C grinned as she picked a white sergeant's uniform and a peacock feather half-mask. She obviously knew what Anna was up to. In the end, Dake bought the Prince of the Night suit. After a 50% discount, the 200 credit set was still within his acceptable range. And besides other things, the quality of the fabric of this suit was very high. After the boss of the clothing store cast a spell to shrink it, it was very comfortable to wear. If possible, he could even keep it until the Christmas ball. At that time, he could also save a lot of money. After leaving the velvet clothing store, Dake, Anna, and Luo C walked around the stores and finally came to a high-class restaurant. This restaurant was called Waltz, and was quite famous among the students. It mainly promoted a kind of style. Dake specially ordered the most expensive dessert ice cream for Anna and Luo C, while he ordered a small cup of ice cream for himself. He was already very familiar with small tricks like this to restrain gluttony. The three of them enjoyed the sweet ice cream in the cool autumn, enjoying a completely different pleasure from summer. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, there were maple leaves falling in the wind and bustling crowds. The smell of youth was like a broken kite, floating higher and higher. C. Keat, who was leaning against a maple tree like an ancient detective, disguised herself with a newspaper. Her face turned green from the smell of youth, and her eyes overflowed with coldness like a poisonous snake. It's coming, a new day is coming. Please subscribe, please subscribe. Buzz buzz. Chapter 86. Yawn. On the bridge, White and Luo both yawned as they entered Traveller Street. The two fought until the wee hours of the morning and barely got up at 9 in the morning. They didn't go to the cafeteria to eat and instead went to Traveller Street. In the 4 days after Monday, they did their best to listen to classes. Finally, they each saved enough credits and wanted to pick out a costume for the masquerade party on the weekend. In fact, Victor already had a Cayman rider suit. But first of all, the masked knight suit was too crude, so he felt that he had been tricked by Lion Sr. Secondly, he had worn a masked knight costume in his confrontation with that perverted gentleman. In order to not expose his identity, he wanted to buy a better one. I heard that the 3 princesses will join the party in disguise. Whoever gets the favor of one of the princesses will be able to dance with that princess when the clock strikes 12. Luo Boat rambled as if he had nothing to say. White's eyelids drooped. Not interested. Luo Boat asked again, do you know about the Halloween ghost hunt? White perked up. Of course I know. It's the best chance to get a lot of credits. With credits, you can have everything. Luo Boat smiled mysteriously. Then you definitely don't know who was last year's third-year champion? White was stunned. Why specifically say third year? Wait, don't tell me that last year's third-year champion was Panduola? Luo Boat said proudly, that's right. Her name is clearly hanging in the Academy's prize showroom. How about it? Are you motivated? White suddenly stood still. Luo Boat. Luo Boat. Yes. White, this year's first-year champion is ours. Then, White, who was in high spirits, entered a famous velvet clothing store to make himself look more elegant. A few minutes later, they ran away. Isn't this too expensive? If we use up all our credits, how are we going to buy materials to strengthen ourselves? How about we buy some next weekend? Maybe that's a good idea. I'm a bit hungry, White. Let's go find something to eat. Thus, White and Luo Boat dejectedly walked to the street filled with restaurants. Inadvertently, the two of them passed by the Waltz Music Restaurant and saw Doc and the other two through the glass, as well as Diana and Rose's high-class ice cream. Gulp, Victor swallowed his saliva and whispered, Robert, How many credits did that chocolate strawberry honeydew melon triple cream top ice cream cost? Robert said, I think it's 19 credits. Victor, it's been 2 periods, quick. Luo Boat, slurp, white, let's wait until after Halloween. We'll definitely be able to afford it. Luo Boat, actually we can afford it now. White, stop fooling around, we'll use the credits to buy materials. Luo Boat, actually I have a compromise. White, huh. C. Keat, who was leaning against a maple tree, pretended to read the newspaper. She glanced at them and sneered. One of them was the hero's son, and the other was someone she had tied up. So you're the hero's son's follower? I thought he was a person who had nothing like me, so I showed him some mercy that night. If I had known earlier. Dake was eating ice cream in small bites. He was in a good mood today. Even though it was a little different from what he had planned, he still gained something. Anna and Luo C were eating ice cream and playing around. The corners of their mouths were gradually stained with cream. White and Luo Boat pushed open the door and entered. They ordered a 19-credit cup and 2 spoons from the counter. Dake was a little surprised to see the 2 of them, but he didn't pay them much attention. Dake, let's team up for Halloween. Anna and Luo C also talked about the masquerade party. Dake was puzzled. You can team up for the event? Of course. Anna stuck out her pink tongue and rolled up the white cream at the corner of her mouth. She whispered, I heard that senior students often do this. Teaming up can increase the efficiency of catching ghosts, and at the end of the awards, all the points will be given to one person to compete for the grade championship. Dake was stunned. Isn't that cheating? Anna was confused. But everyone does it. Dake showed a gentle smile. Then, do you know how many grade championships have been won this way? Anna used the handle of her spoon to support her dimples. After thinking for a while, she said, I don't think so. Dake. That's right. He lowered his head and ate a mouthful of ice cream. Then he said, this masquerade party can actually be seen as a trial. It can be used to test the results of the 2 months of school. If I team up with you, the effect of your trial will be greatly reduced. Anna thought for a while and smiled. I'll listen to you. Around 10:30 p.m. Dake said goodbye to Anna under her reluctant gaze. Then he walked past the brave duo and left the Waltz Music Restaurant. He was very interested in the ghost hunt on Halloween, but it was mainly for the credits. As for the grade championship, whoever wanted it could have it. A few minutes later, he walked out of the food street filled with restaurants and turned into an old and sparsely populated street. Not all areas of Traveler's Street were popular. There were always some unpopular shops that no one cared about. The shops had to do business. If no one came, they would inevitably close. He had been here before he familiarized himself with the area, but this was the first time he had taken the initiative to come here. But there was always a first time for people. After turning into the back of an old, deserted shop, Doc stopped and turned around. He silently counted in his heart, 3, 2, 1. Then a person wearing a squid leather jacket walked out from behind the wall. Dake looked at the person carefully and asked curiously, So you followed me all the way because I like squid? C. Keat's voice became hoarse under the filter of the leather jacket. Damn it, it's not squid, it's squid. Dake shook his head. We're all seafood. Who's worse than who? Let's be direct. Why did you follow me? C. Keat. I didn't follow you. Dake. Question mark. C. Keat. I'm just a squid passing by. Dake. C. Keat. You're the one collecting love divination cards? Chapter 87. Are you talking about the flower cards? Dake reached down and a whole deck of flower cards appeared in his hand. There were a total of 18 flower cards. With a rub of his thumb, they spread out like a folding fan. Each flower card had a different design and was an excellent collector's item. Dake spoke with great familiarity. The bright red camellia represents the most modest love. The devastatingly beautiful beauty you, even if she burns her own life, she will never leave. The red spider lily at the end of the other shore, in the unseen end, watches the sad love that will never meet again. The beauty of death in such a hopeless situation is truly poignant. And my favorite white devil's snare, with thousands of miles of love, seeing the flower is like seeing the person. C. Keat listened with a dumbfounded expression. Although the squid skin couldn't show detailed expressions, his astonishment was expressed by the fact that he hadn't moved for a long time. This person, how much research does he have on flower cards? We are the ones who make the flower cards. Why can't I understand what he's saying? And that white devil's snare, why does it look so familiar? Isn't that the one I stuffed under someone's door? https://m. Vipkanchu. VIPC Keat had originally come with the intention of denouncing a punitive expedition. In the last batch of flower cards distributed last week, a large portion of them hadn't been activated. This directly reduced the efficiency of the church's collection of yearning, and caused them to be unable to repair the cracked statue of the goddess. From this, the church noticed that someone was collecting a large number of flower cards. Then, they associated it with the inexplicable crack on the statue of the goddess. They equated the flower card collector with the statue destroyer. C. Keat was just a pawn who came to investigate. His purpose was to investigate and his mission was to investigate. Once it was confirmed that flower card collector was equal to statue destroyer, the church would give him the necessary punishment for the sake of the goddess. But C. Keat would never have thought that his disguise would be so clumsy. Speaking of which, who would read the newspaper on the street while leaning against a tree? Wouldn't it be better to spend some money to sit in the restaurant and spy on him? Dake had noticed his stalker not long after he sat down in the restaurant, but he deliberately kept quiet. In short, if he knew what was good for him and left, Dake would pretend that he didn't see anything. But since he didn't leave, he had to get some information out of him. In the end, before he could ask anything, the other party exposed everything with a single sentence. Dake immediately figured out the cause and effect. He even guessed that this was the squid from the Marine Order, the one who transformed Luo boat into a woman. And the reason why this squid came to find him was that his behavior of collecting flower cards was too blatant. But there was no need to hide it, was there? He was just a pure collector of flower cards. Dake's heart was as clear as a mirror. His praise and fanaticism for the flower cards came from the bottom of his heart without any flaws. Scott had indeed felt that fanaticism, and he had believed him at the first moment. At this point, C. Keat could actually go back and report back. However, ever since he joined the church, some of the thoughts in his heart became harder and harder to suppress. He wanted to represent the goddess and punish this heretic. Dake said casually, "Excuse me, did you make these flower cards? If possible, I would like to collect some that are not repetitive." C. Keat's mouth twitched, and he didn't care about anything else. The magic summoner. Woo. Oh, he. The sudden piercing pain in his buttocks and the sharp laughter behind him caused C. Keat's heart to be shrouded in a haze in an instant. But in the next moment, his world became completely silent. Whether it was the sharp mocking laughter, the rustling of leaves, or even the seemingly concerned inquiry of the first-year aristocratic student in front of him, none of it entered his ears. He suddenly opened his mouth and angrily rebuked, but he still couldn't make a sound. He didn't know if he couldn't make a sound, or if he simply couldn't hear the sound he made. This was completely different from the silence card that Professor Shi Erfu was used to using. At least the silence card didn't block one's hearing. C. Keat, who was filled with endless fear, finally saw the sneak attackers behind him, White and Luo boat. "It's him, it's him, it's him. I remember now, it's him. I saw a small section of the octopus's tentacle before I fainted. It's the squid, Luo boat." White helplessly grabbed Luo boat's arm to prevent him from rushing up and smashing C. Keat's head in a fit of rage. The little fiend hiding on the eaves had already shut its mouth. It had just injected the silence potion into its syringe, and then used the small dart to throw it at C. Keat's buttocks, giving them a fatal blow. After the syringe had played its role, it turned into stars and disappeared. C. Keat didn't see the syringe, only White and Luo Boat, who had just arrived at the scene. White had a naturally sharp intuition, and he had already noticed C. Keat's strange gaze at the Waltz restaurant. However, after eating the expensive ice cream with Luo Boat, he felt that something was amiss and traced the direction C. Keat had disappeared in. Thus, in this small area, for people from 3 different forces gathered at the same time. Dake calmly looked at the sudden appearance of White and Luo Boat. He didn't think it was a coincidence. After all, the little fiend had already seen their arrival from the roof. Therefore, this was just a foregone conclusion. For example, although White grabbed Luo Boat's right hand, he couldn't grab his left hand at the same time. In the name of Luo Boat Broheim, come out, Rat Man Cyborg. Luo Boat summoned his magic guide fairy that he had created during his magic guide lesson. It was an ugly rat that stood on 2 legs and was as tall as a human. It was a remnant of the destroyed Skaven rat empire. It was a robot on the left and a human on the right. It was a rat man cyborg with an acid spray in its hand. Luo Boat don't. Seeing the rat man cyborg summoned by Robert aiming the flamethrower at the squid's face, Victor stopped him with a terrified expression. If they allowed the rat man cyborg to spray acid on C. Keat's face, they would definitely be punished or even expelled. St. Mary's clearly forbade fighting, and all disputes were advocated in the form of duels. Because of his duel with Dake last time, he had especially crammed up on the relevant school rules. Generally, the punishment for fighting wasn't heavy. At most, some points would be deducted. But if it caused an injury that was difficult to heal, however, the rat man cyborg's acid had already corroded C. Keat's squid skin. Just as Luo Boat wanted to take another step forward, C. Keat's lips suddenly moved quickly, silently casting a spell. A dark green 3-eyed squid turned solid and pounced on the rat man cyborg at the same time. The 2 magic guide fairies tangled together. Luo Boat fiercely shook off White. He clenched his fist and rushed forward, punching C. Keat in the mouth with all his strength. Bang! The typhoon caused a power outage for a period of time. It was a new day, a new day. Chapter 88. The punch was merciless, and almost all of the anger he had been suppressing came pouring out. C. Keat had never been beaten to such an extent. His mind went blank, and he couldn't use any magic cards. He screamed in pain. Robert was still unwilling to stop. He pounced forward and pushed Scott to the ground. Then, he sat on top of Scott and swung his fist at Scott's face. The leather cover on C. Keat's face was broken, revealing his mouth and nose. Luo Boat tore the leather cover from bottom to top, and finally saw the man's face. Luo Boat hadn't seen him before because he was a second-year student at the aristocrat house, but that didn't stop him from punching his acne-filled face a few more times. Finally, when C. Keat's face was bruised and swollen, Luo Boat's anger subsided. He laughed loudly, feeling happier than ever since he'd entered the school. C. Keat lay on the ground, panting, with tears and snot running down his face. White stared at him from the side. It was the first time he'd seen Luo Boat really hit someone. Remember the URL? Vipkanshu. 6 after that day, Luo Boat accidentally told White that he'd been kidnapped the whole night, but he didn't tell him that he'd become a woman. White had only just connected the murderer to the cult in the secret room. He was the only one who'd seen C. Keat wearing the squid leather cover. "What do we do now?" White asked. Luo Boat sighed and said fiercely, "What else can we do? Of course we send him to Professor Shi Erfu. I'm sure Professor Shi Erfu will deal with him properly." Don't. C. Keat, who was playing dead on the ground, immediately screamed, "Don't send me to Professor Shi Erfu. I'll be expelled. And you will also be confined." Luo Boat sneered, "Confinement? I'm only here for revenge. How could I be locked up?" "No." But White suddenly interrupted. "Luo Boat, he's right. You hit him too hard. If Professor Shi Erfu finds out, not only will he be grounded, but he will also lose at least 50 marks. Luo Boat stared blankly for a moment before crying out, "How is that possible? This isn't fair." White shook his head. There's nothing unfair about it. Fighting is wrong. Luo Boat, what about us? White pretended to hesitate and said, Anyway, we've already had our revenge, haven't we? He didn't do anything to you last time, so why don't we just let it go? Luo Boat, but last time. White. Huh. Luo Boat's face fell. Nothing. White continued, Ahem, maybe we can ask Dake. He was here just now. Where's Dake? Dake had already left. As for what White and Luo Boat wanted to do with Sea Keat, that was their own business. However, Dake speculated that White wouldn't want to take Sea Keat to Professor Shi Erfu. The flower plaque, the statue, the church, these things seemed to be connected. But if you thought about it carefully, you would find that there was a trace of unerasable strangeness, and White was already deeply involved in it. Dake, on the other hand, left after discovering that the statue wasn't anything good. But the main reason why he didn't want to get involved was because of Professor Ka Zaire. As long as one was human, one would be biased when doing things. At night, Sea Keat limped into a secret room wearing a repaired leather case. The members of the church sat around him and couldn't help but look at the stitches on his leather case. There were a total of 16 church members present. Apart from the leader who gathered them, no one knew their true identities. From the moment he entered this room, Sea Keat was no longer Sea Keat, but Cuttlefish. So, what's going on? The one who spoke was their leader. Mr. Hai Xing. Cuttlefish was too embarrassed to answer the leader's question. Mr. Hai Xing frowned. I remember telling you to observe first and not make a move. Cuttlefish finally broke down. I really didn't make a move first. Mr. Hai Xing was puzzled. Could it be that the Valkyrie's son made a move first? He's a treasure in the eyes of the professors and a future star of the Shang Molian. Why would he make a move first? It wasn't them. Cuttlefish cried. It was the Valkyrie's son and his lackeys. I just moved my mouth and they made a move first. Tisk, why is the Valkyrie's son involved again? Mr. Hai Xing felt a headache coming on. Cuttlefish immediately shifted the blame. I was followed. The person we dealt with that night was the Valkyrie's lackey, Luo Boat Broheim. They discovered me. Mr. Hai Xing, how did they discover you? Cuttlefish, I don't know, I really don't know. It's not my fault. Mr. Hai Xing's headache worsened. Then how did you escape? Cuttlefish, the Valkyrie's son let me go. Mr. Hai Xing, the Valkyrie's son let you go? All the marine products looked at each other in dismay, unable to understand what was going on. One of them, the eel-headed one and the only female in the church, Miss Haishan, was puzzled. Then is Dake Dimming the person we're looking for? Cuttlefish shook his head. Although I was beaten up, he shouldn't be the one who destroyed the goddess statue. The reason for collecting flower cards might just be a hobby. Miss Haishan, then who could it be? It can't be the Valkyrie's son, right? Right, what's his name? Pufferfish, I think his name is White God? Mr. Hai Xing, it's White Gouda. Pufferfish, exclamation point. Mr. Hai Xing sighed. We can't cause any more trouble. We don't have much time left. We must repair the statue before the arrival of the holy night and offer a living sacrifice to revive the goddess during the holy ceremony. Cuttlefish took off his leather case and turned back into Sea Keat. He carefully crept into the common room of the aristocrat compound. However, the person he wanted to avoid was drinking tea and reading the newspaper in the common room. Beside him were the two shameless girls. Sea Keat turned sideways, trying to avoid being seen as much as possible. However, Dake inadvertently raised his head and met Cuttlefish's gaze. Sea Keat suddenly became nervous. It was only when Dake continued to read the newspaper as if nothing had happened that Cuttlefish finally let out a sigh of relief. It seems that Dake Dimming really did leave first during the day. That's why he didn't see my true face under the leather case. Sea Keat quickly walked up the stairs. The narrow space of the stairs made him feel much more comfortable. He gently touched the bruises on his face and felt a sharp pain. This made him hate Luo Boat and White even more. The leader said that we can't cause any trouble before the arrival of the holy night, but on the day of the holy night. Chapter 89. Common Room. Dake put down the newspaper and looked at the information about C. Keat in his notebook. He had a basic understanding of this second-year student. C. Keat was actually quite famous in the second year, even though it was the opposite of him. When they heard that something happened to his family, most of the students were afraid of provoking him, so they didn't mention it. In the end, he was still misunderstood. The students were actually quite helpless. However, it was only the second month of school and their relationship wasn't that good, so they just let him be. In short, everyone had their own way of living. On Sunday, Dake fermented the remaining 3 dried white fruits and blue fruits into juice. He then mixed them and made the energy potion. This way, he would have 5 energy potion cards. Remember, https://m Vipkanchu. VIP. Even though they couldn't use more than 3 cards of the same type in an official duel, there was no such restriction outside of the duel. Dake was already preparing for the masquerade party. Of course, Dake wasn't the only one preparing for the masquerade party. Whether it was for the academic credits, the title of the year's champion, or to attract the attention of the princesses. In short, the first-year students were more serious than ever. People who never went to the library in the past would often go there now. The reading room that always had empty seats was now packed to the brim. It could be said that they were cramming at the last minute or changing for the better. In short, the effects of the masquerade party seemed to be showing. Students at this age needed motivation. During the first class on Monday, Professor Shi Erfu explained the rules of the masquerade party. The specific rules were already logged into the school card and could be checked at any time. Professor Ka Zayer began to make ghosts and monsters. Even Professor Li Li was pulled in to help. As for the first-year students' arithmetic homework, it naturally fell into Doc's hands. It was still more than a week away from Halloween, but it felt like it would be tomorrow. The students talked about Halloween every day. Whether it was makeup, ghosts, academic credits, or princesses, they never got tired of talking about it. And on Wednesday, no one knew who brought it up first. The topic of dance partners had exploded among the first-year students. It was originally a popular topic among the upper-year students. After 3 or 4 days, it finally sank among the first-year students. This seemed to be an opportunity for the little magisters to awaken their awareness of the opposite sex. 2 months after school started, it was also the time for the little magisters to get to know each other. What was moderate? It was a superficial understanding without going deeper. In the world of men and women, the first impression was the most beautiful. A hazy relationship was the most desirable. Once it was too deep, it wouldn't be beautiful. In short, it seemed to have become a trend to send invitations to the opposite sex. Furthermore, there were many ways to invite him. Some people would send a message. Someone would hand over a letter like a confession. There were also people who would meticulously create an invitation to the ball. As the brightest star among the first-year students, Dake Dim-ing enjoyed almost all kinds of invitations. For example, after the summoning class on Wednesday, someone asked D. Anna to send a message, but Dake decisively rejected it. He didn't even know the person's name. D. Anna happily sent the message back. When he went out on Thursday morning, he found 3 letters stuffed into the crack of the door. It was 6:15 in the morning. Normally, no one would be earlier than him. Dake didn't ignore the 3 letters or throw them into the trash can. Although it was convenient, it was disrespectful to her. He picked up the 3 letters, opened them in the common room, and replied to them one by one. There was a name on the letter, but there was no room number, so he couldn't return the letters for the time being. Later, he thought about it and entrusted this task to D. Anna. D. Anna sent the letters back in no time. She even hummed a tune when she came back. After the second class on Thursday morning, Dake was called to the corner of the castle again. A female student from an unknown school held back her shyness and handed him an unusually delicate handmade invitation. He had no choice but to tell her that he already had a dance partner. So on Thursday afternoon, the news that Dake Dimming already had a dance partner spread like the wind throughout the first year. Anna stayed by his side like a mother hen protecting her young. When people mentioned a dance partner, she couldn't help but hold her head high. So the news that Dake's dance partner was Anna caught up with the previous news as if it had grown legs. After that, the number of invitations decreased visibly. Dake finally had some peace. The invitations from the first-year students gave him a feeling that they were more formal. Most people's feelings for each other were hazy. There was a strong trace of imitation. Some people even used this as a comparison. It was very immature. In the blink of an eye, it was the last weekend before Halloween. This weekend was the last chance for students who hadn't bought their costumes for the dance. White and Luo both were running around, looking for cheap and unique costumes. They seemed to be really enjoying Halloween, picking out the monster costumes that had been forgotten in the corner. And more people, such as Anna and Luo C, were speeding up the production of magic elf cards. In a short time, more and more people borrowed the laboratory. It was also at this time that the students suddenly realized that the materials provided by Professor Kazair were so expensive. The core materials they prepared themselves were not worth mentioning in front of the value of the materials package. In short, all kinds of problems emerged one after another, and there were even cases of people buying the wrong materials. Every laboratory was a mess. And this weekend, Dake was researching the revealing potion. Since they talked about ghosts, there was no shortage of ghosts. To identify transparent ghosts or other invisible monsters, they needed the revealing potion. In order to research this thing, Dake spent a total of 500 credits in research funds. This was extremely incredible in the eyes of the first-year students at this stage. After all, 4 weeks of normal lectures only cost 480 credits. Dake's final harvest was 3 bottles of revealing potion. One of the bottles failed in the process of making a magic potion card and was consumed. The second bottle was a lucky success. The magic potion card produced was in the form of a prop card. But it was no longer a potion, but a kind of revealing powder card. The need to find the location of the invisible unit was the limitation of the revealing powder. But Dake was already quite satisfied. On Sunday evening, under the afterglow of the setting sun, the blond boy tasted the unscented black tea as usual and quietly flipped through the books. Another invitation for the masquerade party was sent to him. Chapter 90. Ai Mamo Tisai rested her chin on her hand as she pulled at the Golden King and the secret treasure book on the table. Her eyes were drifting as she looked to the left. The senior librarian had some sort of relationship with the Duke's son at some point in time. Dake Dimeng, who used to walk around the counter, would now stop in front of the counter for a minute or two. Ai Ma had heard a lot of rumors about Panduola Doragon. She didn't go out of her way to inquire about it. She just sat in the common room of the Knights Academy and heard rumors about her from time to time. When they talked about her, they always spoke in a tone of reverence and admiration, as if they weren't talking about someone of the same age, but, a goddess. Would a goddess shamelessly stick to someone like that? Ai Ma snorted. Dake glanced sideways at the ball invitation that Panduola personally handed to him. He was very curious about where she bought the shell of this thing. The website was https://m Vipkanchu. VIP. Well, the senior's fingers were really white, and her nails were narrow and long. It felt like they could easily scratch the depths of one's heart. Do you want it? Panduola bent down. Her tight uniform couldn't support her towering figure, which tested one's heart. Her breath carried a hint of fragrance that floated to the tip of one's nose. Dake pushed the invitation back without hesitation. Sorry, I have. You're already so familiar with it? Panduola took the invitation back. In reality, it was just a blank piece of paper. However, her eyebrows drooped slightly, and she squeezed out a trace of disappointment. Her slender fingers quietly pointed at Ai Ma, who was diagonally behind her. Her upper body continued to lean forward as she whispered, "It can't be her, right?" Dake frowned. This was the second time Panduola paired him with AI Ma. Did the two of them give off such a feeling to outsiders? Panduola's mind was sharp. Her eyes flashed, and she said with a smile, "If you have it, we can exchange it," Dake said helplessly. "The theme of Halloween is not a dance party." Panduola, Christmas then? Dake. Ha. In fact, Panduola was only there to suck on her juniors after work to ease her mood. She left the library not long after that. Unlike the calmness of the lower grade students, the upper grade students were actually under a lot of pressure. Moreover, the more outstanding a student was, the more so it was. Schoolwork and competitions were indispensable. Especially since she also had to work as a librarian, she had to manage her time better than her peers. Lady Bella had suggested to her many times that she relinquish this responsibility, but she had always refused without hesitation. When she was in first grade, it was her job as a librarian that had saved her from confusion. Humans should never forget their roots. Once you forget your roots, you will no longer be human. On the way, she thought of her cute junior. Yeah, that feeling of being a little stubborn is pretty good too. Dake Dimeng was vexed. He had been forced to agree to the Christmas dance party, although it was one-sided. Even though he didn't care who his Christmas partner would be, he felt like he had lost if it was decided just like that. Thinking about it, he suddenly realized, could this be the bitterness and melancholy of puberty? Dake quickly threw away his thoughts. Today was the 29th of October. The night after tomorrow was Halloween. The masquerade party is the day after tomorrow. In the corner of the reading room, Victor almost broke his pen in half. In order to create the magic card for the masquerade party, he and Luo Boat had been studying here for the entire afternoon, but they were still a mess. The more complicated the magic card creation, the more precise the various data requirements, and the less parts that could be followed. If one wanted to create their own magic card, they had to learn how to calculate. Calculation, arithmetic. Before learning the magic language in second grade, arithmetic class was the biggest nightmare of the little magisters. White's patience was actually pretty good, but he still gradually lost it as the numbers piled up. Just when 90% of his brain was filled with irritation, he saw the moon in the depths of his heart. From one of the entrances of the reading room, he walked into his white moonlight. Unrequited love was a very strange emotion. He was alone, locked in his own world. As long as he did not expose it, it would only get bigger and bigger. White once wanted to use taboo love to check the favorability of his senior Panduola under Luo Boat's instigation. But that day, Panduola happened to not be there. So he could not muster up the courage anymore. As long as he did not open his eyes, he would not wake up from his dream. He probably knew that he and his senior were two people on a parallel line. Of course, in his subconscious mind, that was just the current situation. The future would be different. This masquerade party was an opportunity. If he could become the champion of the first grade, he could more or less attract her attention. At that time, White felt that he would be more confident. Maybe he could invite her to dance at the Christmas ball. The Christmas ball was the real ball. What was the Halloween ball? It wasn't until he noticed from afar that Senior Pandora handed an invitation to the dance party to Dark that he suddenly realized what was going on. The Halloween ball was also a ball. Fortunately, Dake did not seem to accept. But was this really a blessing? He did not accept because Dake already had a dance partner. Otherwise, who would refuse Panduola's invitation? Also, when did Dake become so close to Panduola? Crack. The lead of the pencil was poked and broke. I will win. The Shangmalian night sky was still so clear, like a pitch-black mirror that reflected people's hearts, but did not let people see through it. A new week. Monday's classes were unstable, and the professors did not want to teach. Tuesday and Wednesday were holidays. But on Tuesday afternoon, all the students were asked to return to the tower dormitory. They could only walk out of the tower at 6 o'clock in the evening. That was when the masquerade party began. There was no opening ceremony. The ghosts and monsters that filled the castle were the best opening ceremony. Ghosts, zombies, mummies, jack pumpkins. when the clock struck 6 o'clock, it was the night of 100 ghosts and monsters. The huge castle was the stage of the students, but also the stage of the ghosts and monsters. The 1,000 students in their costumes. The princess mixed in with a mask. The monsters and monsters dancing wildly in the chaos. Gazing at the ancient castle, the long moon. The fog and the truth always appeared on the chessboard at the same time. Who could find their truth at the ball? Who could dig out the final truth in the chaos? Who could seize the dream in the midst of the revelry? Walking with the brave. Walking with the princess. Walking with the demon god. Let's fool around together. There should be nothing else at night. +3 today, before 6 o'clock. If not, it would be +4 tomorrow. Chapter 91. In the Tower of the Aristocrat's House. Dake dripped a drop of cat juice on the roots of the catnip grass and watered some magic potion on the wormwood. He then nodded in satisfaction. Apart from other things, growing flowers and plants really cultivated one's sentiments. Growing something at home would make one miss more. It would make one feel that life was not so empty. After putting the catnip grass back into the sleeping basket, Dake began to carefully check the things that he brought with him. The masquerade ball started at 6 o'clock in the evening and lasted until the clock struck 12. The students would welcome a new day in the hall. During this period, they had to go deep into the castle to find hidden ghosts and monsters and kill them. The credits obtained from killing ghosts and monsters would be recorded on the school card. Using the school card, one could even check their ranking in each year and in each school. The most dazzling thing was naturally the overall ranking. Different from the year champion, the overall ranking champion would not only receive the special title of champion, but also receive a huge amount of credits and rare resources as a reward. Remember the website, Vipcanshu. 6. Therefore, even the senior students would go all out at the masquerade ball. It wasn't an easy task to snatch credits from the fingers of the advanced students. Fortunately, the college had the relevant regulations. Ghosts and monsters were from 1 star to 8 star. Third-year students who killed 1-star ghosts and monsters would not receive any credits. Fourth-year students who killed 2-star ghosts and monsters below would not receive any credits. Fifth-year students who killed 3-star ghosts and monsters below would not receive any credits. Sixth-year students who killed 4-star ghosts and monsters below would not receive any credits. Dake's goal was very clear. He wanted to obtain more credits. Therefore, they couldn't put too much weight on their clothes. It was best to only bring a card bag. Dake took out the magic cards and organized them. It had been exactly 2 months since school started. Not counting the flower cards, Doc already had a total of 16 magic cards just in terms of magic cards. 1. Pride I 2. Pride 2 3. Bliss I 4. Bliss 3 5. Magical Beast Ivan 6. Trash Slime 7. Kettle 8. Happy Card 9. Silencing Potion 8. Revealing Powder X29. Energy Potion X5. With the addition of the branch card, there were 17 cards. On the other hand, the card packs provided by the Academy could fill up to 21 magic cards. So, he thought for a moment and put the outfit card into it. He also put notes, a pencil, an eraser, and a magic pen in the interlayer. Everything was ready. Dake changed into the Evernight Prince outfit, put on the half-black crow mask, tidied his hair, and opened the door. Hey! Anna jumped out of the grass. Anna, who had put on the Night Princess outfit, was like a fairy walking out of the night, elegant, beautiful, and lovely. Beside her was Luo C, who had his soft blonde hair tied up in a hat and was wearing a white officer's uniform. He was inexplicably handsome. According to Luo C herself, she wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to experience what it was like to be a boy. From a psychological point of view, this was her subconscious desire to be a cousin. Both of them had yet to put on their masks. It was obvious that they had been waiting here on purpose. Dake pressed between his eyebrows helplessly. Anna stretched out her small white hand and pouted. Where's the candy? Meow. The cat plant revealed half of its face from behind Dake. Luo Si, who was beside Deanna, suddenly brightened up. Dake, you also have a cat plant. Dake changed the topic. I've had it for quite some time. Luo Si looked at the cat plant that had a bud on its head and said enviously, That's great. My Garfield is already as fat as a ball. Dake laughed. Being fat has its benefits. Plus, the cat plant won't get sick because of being fat. That's true, Luo Si showed a rare hint of subjective opinion. My Garfield is very comfortable when rubbing it. It's just that sometimes, when I wake up in the morning, I find my stomach uncomfortable. Dake laughed. Haha, my cat plant likes to sleep next to my pillow. Deanna pouted. No, Deanna has to buy one too. The three of them laughed and walked to the common room. Deanna and Luo Si also put on the black crow mask and peacock plume mask respectively when they went downstairs. When they arrived, the common room was already full of people. Thanks to the spacious common room, it was able to squeeze in all 6 grades. Standing on the stairs and looking out, they could see that most of the seniors were wearing formal wear. It was neither exaggerated nor simple, just like the type that would be worn at a normal banquet. Some of the upperclassmen even had a red rose in their chest pocket. Their purpose was obvious. But probably no one would have thought that the homogeneity of the makeup would be so serious. If only 1 or 2 people were wearing this, it would be fine. But with dozens of people wearing it together, it was inevitable that they would become a crowd. But now that things had come to this, there was nothing they could do. If they wanted to stand out, they could only rely on their strength. The seniors rubbed their palms in anticipation. The juniors still maintained their childlike innocence and were dressed in all kinds of monster costumes. And according to Dake's understanding of the twin princesses, they were likely more interested in the students who dressed up as monsters. That was not the cute and obedient little cutie that she appeared to be. On the other hand, the eldest princess was a person who was as beautiful and elegant as she looked, gentle and virtuous. Perhaps she would have a good impression of the Assassai man. Magic Institute Tower. Even though it was almost 6 o'clock, Panduola was still in her dorm room. She was wearing a snow-white bridal gown, which was the embodiment of her beautiful vision. This was the 4th year that Panduola had participated in the Institute's masquerade ball. Of course, she knew how crowded the common room would be at this time. There was no need to squeeze in there just to grab a little bit of the opportunity. As long as she moved a little bit, she could avoid a lot of trouble, so why not? Night Institute Tower. White and Luo Boat had already been squeezed into French fries. The 2 of them had bought the costumes they were wearing on Saturday. Luo Boat was wearing a one-piece werewolf costume. This was obviously not a costume that ordinary people could wear, but Luo Boat had enough physique and strength. In the end, White couldn't give up her face and wore a vampire countess costume that revealed half of her face. Vampires and werewolves. Interesting. Fools Institute Tower. Finally, at the moment that everyone had been waiting for, the hour hand pointed straight down. A loud bell rang from the spiral clock tower located in the center of the institute. Duang. The gate was opened. The students immediately rushed out of their respective towers like rabbits that had escaped from their cages. Almost 1,000 students swarmed into St. Marianne's castle in an instant. The sleeping ghosts opened their eyes, and what greeted them were countless black bats. Under the baptism of the bats, the first-year students mixed in with the crowd excitedly rushed into the castle. Chapter 92. St. Marian's Castle, excluding the basement that no one knew of, had a total of 9 floors. The place that the students used for classes only occupied a very small part of the castle. Even the graduates who had stayed in the castle for 6 years were rarely able to explore the map on the surface. If there was no masquerade party, the number of students would be even lower. This was obviously a good opportunity to explore the map. At the same time when the students were pouring into the castle, accompanied by the principal of Aerti, the only 3 princesses of the kingdom also stepped into the castle. The eldest princess, Elisha. The second princess, Anna, was born in advance because of a 3-second advantage. The third princess, Anchi, lost her life because of a 3-second disadvantage. The 3 princesses changed into makeup clothes to cover their faces. Remember, https://m. Vipkanchu. VIP. The principal of AURTI asked with concern, "Do you really not need me to accompany you?" Princess Elisha nodded slightly and said, "This is a rare chance to relax. I want to walk alone. If possible, please take care of my 2 sisters. They are quite naughty." And Chi, who was trying to hide in the teddy bear, raised her head sharply and said angrily, "Sister, didn't you say you wouldn't expose my shortcomings in front of outsiders?" Princess Elisha pinched her soft cheeks, and a trace of affection flashed in her eyes. The principal of AURTI is not an outsider. And Chi still puffed up her cheeks. Anna, who was beside her, suddenly reached out and poked her. She chuckled and said, "Little sister who never grows up." And Chi said angrily, "You are the little sister." Anna raised her neck like a white swan. "I am the elder sister. I won't lower myself to the level of a little sister." Princess Anna suddenly turned around and asked, "By the way, Aunt Cynthia, is that annoying guy Dake Dimming also here?" The principal of AURTI showed a gentle smile. "Yes, he has just entered the school this year. At this time next year, he will be your senior." "It can't be." Princess Anna didn't seem to remember that until now. She said stiffly, "Then can I not come here next year?" Elisa flicked her on the forehead. "Don't be ridiculous. Didn't you say that you wanted to graduate from the same school as your sister?" "Anna, times have changed, ouch." "Ha ha ha, little brat, you don't care about the overall situation." And Chi took the opportunity to hit her on the head, put on a leather bag, and ran away. Anna immediately gave chase with bared fangs and brandished claws. Elisha quickly looked at AURTI and said, "Principal." Principal AURTI nodded slightly. Then, 2 elves holding school cards flew out from his side and quickly caught up with Anna and Chi. Elisha let out a sigh of relief. She put on the exquisite mask that only revealed her nose and mouth. "Principal, I will take my leave now." Southwest of the castle, on the 2nd floor. Dake didn't manage to get rid of Anna and Luo Si in the crowd. He could only walk with them for a while. The second-year students and above had experience and were relatively purposeful. Soon, they ran to different parts of the castle. The first-year students, on the other hand, were completely scattered. "Dake, should we go after them?" Anna looked anxious. She was like a child who was afraid that her candy would be taken away. Luo Si also looked at Dake. Dake patted his forehead. It seemed that he really needed to take them with him for a while. He said patiently, "Don't worry, the professors must have prepared enough ghosts. At the beginning of the ball, even if you don't look for them, they will come to you," he said as he pointed above his head. Diana jerked her head up and saw a hanged ghost with an extremely long neck hanging down from the ceiling. "Wow! Ah!" Anna immediately took out her magic card and excitedly summoned her fantasy beast, Polar Bear. The polar bear landed in a white light. It immediately stood up and clawed at the hanged ghost. Luo Si screamed and instinctively grabbed Dake's arm. Anna instantly made a decision and grabbed Dake's other arm. Dark, who had both his arms grabbed, could only helplessly watch as the polar bear's claws passed through the hanged ghost's ghostly body. Then, the hanged ghost stuck out its blood-red tongue and licked the polar bear's nape. The polar bear suddenly trembled. It was infuriated. "Kakik." The hanged ghost laughed and used its tongue to tease the polar bear again and again. It never got tired. The polar bear, on the other hand, was like a kitten chasing after a butterfly. The polar bear, which was purely physical, was not compatible with ghosts. Even if it was just a one-star hanged ghost, it was enough to torment them. In the end, Luo Si summoned the courage to summon Fantasy Beast, Snow Rabbit, and sent it to the sky with a breath of ice fog. When the hanged ghost disappeared, a piece of candy suddenly fell down. Dake, who was finally free, bent down to pick up the candy on the ground. With a trace of suspicion, he peeled off the candy wrapper. The candy itself looked like an extremely ordinary toffee. However, The candy wrapper was engraved with fine lines. Dake suddenly realized, so the candy wrapper is the real thing. Anna saw his happy face and asked, Dake, did you find anything? Dake wanted to throw away the toffee wrapped in the candy wrapper. However, he suddenly saw Anna staring at him. He clasped the candy wrapper and handed the toffee to her. Anna bit into the toffee. Dake then picked up the candy wrapper and looked at it carefully. This is a one-time use magic card. It should have been injected with magic power in advance. It can last until 12 o'clock at night. Dake was very interested in this kind of craftsmanship. He carefully put away the candy wrapper. Let's continue. Half an hour later. The three of them killed each other on the second floor. Dake reached out to wipe the cream from Anna's mouth and put the 13th candy wrapper into his pocket. Most of the ghosts they encountered along the way were 1-star and 2-star. Some dropped toffee, some dropped candy apples, and some dropped a small piece of pumpkin pie, but they were all wrapped in exquisite wrappers. What a wonderful dessert for the ball. Dake finished the last bit of pumpkin pie and said to Anna and Luoc, Next, let's split up. Let me see. Let's meet in the lobby on the first floor in 5 hours. Anna said obediently, Okay, see you at the ball. Luoc also smiled and said, Don't worry about us. During this half an hour, Dake didn't do anything. He was basically guiding Anna and Luoc to cooperate with each other to catch the ghosts. Unknowingly, the two of them actually had a ranking in the first years of the aristocratic academy, within the top 12. It seemed that although they were only dealing with the low-level ghosts that jumped out on their own, their progress was faster than many others. And Dake himself was currently +0. Although Dake himself didn't care, someone in a corner of the castle seemed to be paying attention to his ranking. White was ranked 3rd in the first-year Knight Academy ranking. When he saw that Dake's name wasn't in the first-year Aristocrat Academy ranking, he couldn't help but become more excited. Keep up the good work, Luo Boat. Okay. Yesterday's chapter was +2, +3 failed, +4 today. Chapter 93. Dake, who had successfully separated from Anna and Luoc, walked alone in a dark and gloomy corner of the castle. The further away from the classroom, the fewer students there were. As for the upperclassmen, they would usually head straight for the higher floors. There were more ghosts and monsters of a higher star level there. Therefore, the 2nd and 3rd floors of the castle were the most suitable places for the upperclassmen to hunt. However, Dake realized that he seemed to have underestimated the creepiness and terror of the castle. It was already late autumn. When the temperature suddenly dropped, the night wind would blow in from time to time, and it would make people shiver uncontrollably. He put his palms together and exhaled. He couldn't help but summon his familiar, the little devil beast. Are you my master? Yes, I am. It saw its master, who had never answered it before, suddenly reply in a very normal way. Website https://m Vipkanshu. VIP. The little devil beast suddenly felt that the atmosphere was not right, and then its face turned gloomy. Ta, ta, ta. The crisp sound of footsteps echoed in the silent castle, and it was getting closer and closer as time passed. The little devil beast trembled as it stared at the shadow of the corner in front of it. Half of a jack pumpkin that was covered in mussels slowly appeared, and the empty pumpkin head was burning with a dim yellow candle flame. Jack. The jack pumpkin suddenly let out a low roar, and its pitch-black muscles instantly expanded. When it saw Dake, it suddenly sped up. No way, sir. The little devil beast let out a terrified scream, and the thought of running for its life rose in an instant. However, just as the thought formed, the dark golden ball of light with a long tail drilled into the back of its head. The little devil beast, which was abnormally scared just a moment ago, instantly narrowed its eyes and looked at the jack pumpkin with disdain and disdain. A mere bastard that can't even survive in the lowest level of hell, and you dare to roar in front of me? The little devil beast covered its body with its wings like a cape, and it actually showed the elegance of a vampire beast. It looked down at the jack pumpkin from the corner of its eyes, and the moment it ran over, it shot out 3 small darts. Die. Pooh. One of the syringes pierced the muscles on Jack Pumpkin's left shoulder, but the other 2 missed their target. Jack Pumpkin dodged the attack the moment it sensed the threat. It crouched down when it was hit in the shoulder. Then, it tightened the muscles in its legs and exploded. Swish! It leaped into the air. It directly crossed the distance between itself and the little demonic beast, and its demonic claws viciously clawed at the little demonic beast flying in the air. Jack! It was as if space itself was being torn apart. 3 pitch-black claw shadows appeared in the air. However, the little demonic beast that had maintained its absolute arrogance from beginning to end and had not taken half a step back had suddenly disappeared into thin air. Jack! By the time Jack Pumpkin reacted, the shark-head syringe had already pierced through the relatively fragile pumpkin wall and hit the candle flame in the pumpkin's heart. Pooh! The candle flame suddenly went out. The carcass of the Jack Pumpkin that fell from the sky gradually turned into sparks, leaving only a small piece of pumpkin pie floating in the air. Dake walked over from behind and grabbed the pumpkin pie. Credits plus 30. Is it really a 3-star monster? Dake carefully peeled off the tin foil wrapping of the pumpkin pie and put away the wrapping paper. Then, he threw the pumpkin pie to the little demonic beast. Slap! The little demonic beast slapped the pumpkin pie away with its wings. I am a little demonic beast. I don't eat food that is given to me. Asterisk. If an overly arrogant person doesn't have the ability to match it, the more I look at it, the more I look at it. Dake silently summed up his experience. At the same time, he learned a lesson. During the battle with Jack Pumpkin just now, the little demonic beast stubbornly refused to dodge because of the arrogance in its heart. It was all thanks to him using the school card to forcefully recall it in time that it avoided the 3-star Jack Pumpkin's almost fatal claw. Otherwise, the little demonic beast would have been badly damaged and pitifully waiting to recover in the school card. But why is this Jack Pumpkin a little different from the ones I encountered before? Recalling the Jack Pumpkin that he encountered with Anna and the others, Dake felt a little apprehensive. A normal Jack Pumpkin should have a pumpkin head. A small monster with 4 skinny limbs would at most hold a small axe, and a small wooden axe without a blade. But what the hell was that muscular pumpkin that he encountered just now? Professor Zayer shouldn't have such a bad taste, right? As he thought about it, Dake's footsteps suddenly froze. He finally remembered. When he was painstakingly correcting the first-year math homework, the person who was called by Professor Zayer to help create a monster was that little fairy named Lee. At this moment, Dake suddenly had a bad premonition. Against the strong ominous feeling, Dake turned into an unused classroom that was covered in dust. In theory, when the professors placed the monsters, they would always hide the more aggressive monsters in the room or in some hidden corner. The monsters that would appear in the aisles to tease the students were the type that leaned towards the funny side. If he wanted to obtain credits faster, he had to find these hidden monsters that had extra credits as rewards. Only by walking into the shadows could he obtain the treasures. Bang! The 2 doors at the front and back of the classroom suddenly closed. The window on the other side was blown open by the strong wind. Fresh blood flowed down the old curtains and gradually dyed them red. Dake held his breath and his right hand had already reached into his card bag. The little devil monster still maintained the pride-eye state and flew in the air with its chin held high. Whoosh! Another gust of wind blew in. The bright moonlight shone in through the gap between the blown curtains and there was a glimmer of light in the dark classroom. Dake fiercely clenched his teeth. Behind the blown curtains, there was a monster with a human head and a bird's body that stood motionless on the windowsill. In the big mouth that revealed 2 fangs, there was a bloody severed hand. Although it was unlikely to be a real severed hand, Dake couldn't help but shiver. Harpy! The battle started 10 seconds after they met. The prideful little demon beast seemed to be feeling humiliated by its defeat against Jack Pumpkin. At this time, it didn't need Dake's order and charged fearlessly. Quick! Dake immediately took out a happy card. And this time the summoning speed was even faster. The happy card took effect almost immediately and the light that shot out shone into the harpy's eyes. This moment of confusion caused the harpy to miss the opportunity to react. The little devil beast was able to kick her in the face and send her flying. Gee! The harpy's sharp cry came from below the window. Chapter 94. The effect of the happy card lasted surprisingly short. The harpy immediately woke up after falling, and a piercing scream pierced the night sky. The bright moon in the sky was unusually bright. The little demon beast wanted to take advantage of the victory to pursue, but Dake, who arrived in time, grabbed the back of its head. The little demon beast, who was grabbed by Dake with one hand like a basketball, flapped its wings and tried to struggle. Dake jerked down and then shrunk into a ball. Almost in the next second, a gust of wind rushed in, and an extremely narrow wind blade tore the curtain and cut the podium diagonally. Bang! The falling curtain, the collapsing podium. The harpy's scream pierced the eardrums. Dake covered his ears, but the sound waves continued to enter his ears, making him feel dizzy. Remember the URL. Vipkanshu. VIP. After about a few seconds, the sound waves suddenly stopped. 2 skills. Dake calculated in his heart. Most of the magic elf skills had a cooldown, and skills like the Wind Sickle Weasel and Banshee's Howl couldn't be fired continuously. And having 2 skills was already considered a very precious purple card. The probability that this harpy didn't have any skills for the time being was very high. Therefore, he turned around and threw the little demon beast out like a softball. Ah! The little demon beast didn't expect that it would become a meat bomb. The moment it was thrown out, it only had time to scream. Then it instinctively closed its wings and grabbed the harpy's face. 2 sharp claws were clasped around her neck. Taking a closer look, the little demon beast's body structure was actually 70% similar to the harpy's. Dake looked at the little demon beast's small dart, quickly condensing, and knew that tonight was over. Although there was a so-called difference in defense value between the magic elf, the powerless magic elf was like a guard who had put down a huge shield. It was just flesh and blood. It was impossible for the little demon beast's small dart to not pierce the delicate skin of a harpy. After a while, the little fiendish beast flew back with an exquisite gift box in its hand. Dake pulled the gift box from under his claws, undid the ribbon, and opened the packaging. Similar to those candies, the outer packaging was still a one-time use magic card, but what was inside was no longer candies and desserts. This is... Dake couldn't help but smile. Inside the gift box was a harpy feather. Judging from the magic waves emanating from the feather, it must be the most precious core material. Immediately, he wrapped the feather in the wrapping paper again and carefully put it into his card pouch. Credits plus 60. Double credits. There are additional materials. Dake suddenly felt like he was addicted. He rested for a while. Dake pulled himself together and continued on his way. The little demonic beast, who had recovered from the state of pride eye, was now walking on the ground with its head down and mumbling something of unknown meaning. Dake ignored it. Instead, he was thinking about his next destination. The probability of a hidden monster appearing in a few consecutive classrooms was not high, but he still searched them one by one. It was not until the washroom in the corner of the castle appeared in front of him that he suddenly stopped. Blood. Blood flowed out from the washroom. Bang! In the next moment, the door of the washroom was kicked from the inside and countless debris burst out. A figure screamed as he flew out and slammed into the wall. A large amount of water gushed out from the washroom. The person who screamed and flew out was also washed over by the water. Dake began to run back without thinking. It was not until he ran 5 or 6 meters that the tide behind him suddenly stopped and scattered in all directions. Dake's mind moved and he saw a mermaid with disheveled hair swimming out crazily from the washroom. They were completely different from the ones in the fairy tales. They had sharp teeth, scarlet eyes, and ugly scales on their faces. The mermaid rode the waves and chased after the student. Blood flowed out as the student narrowly escaped death. Dake lowered his head and saw a body wrapped in a school uniform was washed to the front by the water and was lying motionless. He frowned and gestured to the little demon. "You go." The little demon curled up at his feet reluctantly walked forward a few steps. When it was in front of the body, it used the tip of its wing to poke the body. Wah! The body suddenly flipped over and revealed a green and ugly face with blood flowing out. It's a goblin! The goblin that pretended to be a student jumped up and stabbed the dagger in its hand at the sluggish little demon. But what was pierced by the dagger was only an afterimage of the little demon. The real little demon had already turned into light. Dake grabbed the school card and quickly retreated. After a few seconds, he summoned it again. Wah, too sinister. That scared the hell out of me. Looking at the little demon with lingering fear, Dake once again took out Bliss Eye and whispered, "It's time." Pride Eye's cooldown hadn't finished, so he could only use the new Great Sin card. Luckily, Dake had enough Great Sin cards at this time. Bliss Eye instantly gushed out a pink mist. After receiving Bliss Eye's buff, the little demon's eyes became blurred. But the threat of the ugly mermaid and the green goblin was right in front of it. It didn't completely lose its mind because of this. After all, it was only Bliss Eye. The little demon that regained its digital beast ability immediately shot 3 syringes at the goblin that pretended to be a student, who knew that the goblin suddenly rolled and dodged all the small darts. Then its muscular thighs instantly exerted force and its whole body shot out like a small missile. The dagger in its fingers turned into a poisonous snake and fiercely stabbed at the defenseless little demon. Squeak! A cry rang out. The goblin let out a blood-curdling scream as he was sent flying by little Ivan, who had just appeared. The little demon angrily followed and took the opportunity to use Crazy Stomp on the goblin. Wah! The ugly mermaid suddenly screamed. From the water beside it suddenly pulled out a long whip made of water elements and fiercely whipped at the little demon. Magic summoning! Dake used his middle finger and index finger to grab the energy potion and fiercely swiped it. Ivan's body instantly lit up with a blazing white light. Magic plus 200. Mimic. A moment later, a long whip that was also made of water elements flew over and scattered the mermaid's long whip in the nick of time. Squeak! Ibrahimovic stepped on the wet floor in high spirits. After consuming 100 points of magic power, the imitation skill in its skill bar temporarily changed to Imitation, Water Whip. Chapter 95. This was the first time Dake tried Imitate in a real battle. For Ivan, who only had 100 points of mana, Imitate, which consumed 100 points of mana, could only be used as a last attack before death like Deathly Whisper. However, with the boost from the energy potion, he successfully used Imitate while standing. Before the next use of Imitate, Water Whip would become his inherent skill. Unlike the mermaid's Water Whip, when Ivan used Imitate, he consciously condensed the water elements into a long whip and spun it, causing the power of Water Whip to increase dramatically and shatter the mermaid's long whip. Then, he continued to control the spinning long whip and shot it at the mermaid like a snake. Wah! The mermaid screamed again and pulled out a second long whip from the water, but it was still mercilessly shattered. Ibukin's whip of water viciously lashed its body, sending it flying backwards. An eye for an eye. I remember it in 1 second. https://m. Vipkanchu. VIP, Nan Ivan is me. Credits plus 20. Credits plus 60. Regrettably, the goblin disguised as a student was only an ordinary 2-star ghost. Dake used the goblin's last ripple, Candy Apple, to stuff the little devil's mouth and forcefully pushed it away. Then, he strode towards where the mermaid had disappeared. A small gift box was floating quietly. He opened the gift box and really obtained a mermaid scale. The scale emitted an unusually dense mana aura. Although it was similar to the harpy's feather and was not a rare resource, it was already a very good reward for a Year 1 student who had difficulty obtaining credits. Dark put the scale into his card bag with a smile on his face. Regardless of whether he would use it in the future, he would keep it for now. In less than half an hour, Dake's credits went from +0 to +170, and he jumped to the bottom of the Year 1 Aristocrat Academy rankings. He did not pay attention to this and continued to explore excitedly. Those hidden ghosts were unexpectedly interesting. An entire hour had passed since the masquerade party began. The students of the 6th grade continued to disperse during this hour. They began to spread out from the areas that they would normally use for classes, covering every corner of the castle. In an unknown dark corner, the members of the 16 orders gathered one after another. When the last of the blowfish finally arrived, Leader Hai Xing walked out from the shadows. The restoration of the statue has been completed. It's time. Pick up your weapons, holy war. Victory will be ours in the end. Let those bastards know who the real winner is. It's time to pay the price. For the goddess. The order will win. Time's up. The 16 members of the church suddenly took off their black robes, revealing the leather sheaths under the black robes. The attire that would normally be seen as heresy was very common in a masquerade ball. After encouraging each other, they spread out in groups of 2. Why you? Why you? Squid was assigned to travel with the pufferfish. The pufferfish was assigned to travel with the squid. The two of them disliked each other, but they still moved forward together. The road ahead was definitely not a smooth one. Only by helping each other could they move forward with difficulty. Squid took out a list that the church had drawn up in advance. The list was densely packed with the names of couples, all of whom were considered heresy by the church. The pufferfish also had a list in his hands. Their goal was to select at least 3 couples from this list before 10 o'clock. They had to first confirm whether the feelings between them were sincere. Only couples with sincere feelings were qualified to become living sacrifices for the saints. If it was just a fake couple, then they were not even worthy of being a living sacrifice. Let's start with the couple from the 2nd grade. I've been paying attention to their whereabouts. See Keat under the squid's leather sheath revealed an extremely gloomy expression. This couple was his classmate in the 2nd grade of the Aristocrat Academy. Day after day, every day, they were showing off their love in front of him. He had wanted to strangle them more than once. Now he finally had the chance. Pufferfish, wait, Squid, why don't we start with the couple from the 1st grade? They are more naive and weaker. Squid said gloomily, don't you know that newbies are all monsters? Pufferfish, exclamation point. Mary and Brooke in the 2nd grade were childhood sweethearts who had been together since childhood. They were the type that had been betrothed before they were born. The two of them were born together, grew up together, and received an invitation from the Shang Malian Academy together. The two families had been friends for generations, and there were cases of intermarriage between their ancestors. This time, both parents were very willing to see the marriage between the two of them. And they themselves were very satisfied with each other. At least until they came into contact with more of the colorful world, they were still in the state of a stupid couple who only saw each other. It was also because of this that once they entered the state, they would start to show off their love regardless of where they were, often giving people critical hits. See Keat had had enough of them. He wanted to capture them and send them to the temple so that the goddess could give them the final judgment. The flames of jealousy burned more and more fiercely. The anger accumulated more and more. See Keat could only obtain a moment of peace by hiding himself in the cold leather sheath. Found them. The adulterous couple finally appeared in his field of vision. See Keat narrowed his eyes. During the masquerade party, the two of them actually hid on the outdoor bridge and enjoyed the romance of bathing in the moonlight. Is it them? At some point, Pufferfish's eyes were also burning with flames. It's them. But it's not time to act yet. First, we have to confirm whether their feelings are sincere. A sinister smile appeared at the corner of C. Keat's mouth. Anna and Enchi ran recklessly in the empty castle. The two little princesses, one wearing a teddy bear costume, and the other wearing a teddy bear costume, chased and played with each other to their heart's content. The ghosts that dared to peep around them were all chased away by the two elves of Principal Arti. At the moment when the internal disputes in the kingdom were getting more and more intense, the two little princesses, who had to wait until they reached adulthood to have the right to inherit, were not at the center of the power struggle. But as the daughters of the second princess consort, They were still the representatives of the power behind the second princess consort. Although they were usually mischievous, they were actually very clear-headed. Princess Elisha was the daughter of the empress and had the highest status. Prince Charles was the son of the first princess consort and was the only male heir of the king. If the first princess succeeded the throne, the status of women would rise. If the first prince succeeded the throne, they would still be incomparably noble, but they would lack the initiative in matters such as marriage. Therefore, they temporarily showed their bias towards the first princess. Anna, who ran to the castle window, suddenly had her eyes light up. "Anchi, there's a squid over there. It's a squid." Chapter 96. Hey! The second Princess Anna tiptoed to the window of the castle and looked at the bridge on the second floor from the third floor. The three-eyed squid descended from the sky and seized the opportunity to grab the little sister on the bridge. The little brother who was dating the little sister was about to make a move when the squid's tentacle reached his throat. Keat, who was wearing a squid leather jacket, walked out from the other end of the bridge and said in a hoarse voice filtered by the leather jacket, "You better not scream, or the skin on your throat won't be as hard as your mouth." Bruda swallowed his saliva and looked timidly at his childhood sweetheart who was caught by the squid's tentacle. But Mary shouted without hesitation, "This is a magic elf, someone is attacking us. Bruda, go call the professor." Bruda mustered up his courage and shouted, "But if I leave, what will you do?" "Mary, don't worry, we are husband and wife appointed by God. This is just a test that must be passed. I will be fine. Then I will really go." Bruda took a small step back. Mary's eyebrows trembled. "Go quickly, I will wait for you." "Wait for me." Bruda turned around abruptly and really ran away. Website https://m Vipkanchu. VIP. Even an 8 o'clock TV show wouldn't dare to act like this. Seeing Bruda's back disappear at the end of the bridge, Mary's face darkened. She said in a low voice, "Okay, classmate. Attacking people in school is not a fun script. When I was in first grade, I saw you studying how to refine a three-eyed squid." Keat. The three-eyed squid seemed to feel its master's emotions, and the tentacle that was grabbing Mary really loosened. Mary forcefully pried open the tentacle and slid to the ground. She turned around and gave a flying kick. Before that, a magic card slipped from her sleeve to her fingertips. In just 3 seconds of summoning time, her flying foot was covered with a layer of shimmering metal leg armor. Bang! The instant burst of power was unparalleled. The three-eyed squid's contact surface with the foot instantly caved in, and then it suddenly let out a scream. Its huge body was kicked out like a rubber ball and slammed into the wall of the castle. Smack! Keat. Mary clapped her hands and said softly, "It's a Halloween ball. I don't really want to know what you and your companions are doing. Tell him to let Broda go, and I can pretend that this didn't happen, okay?" Before she could finish her sentence, she looked up and saw a small tiger with snow-white wings descending from the sky. It hammered Keat's cuttlefish skin. Keat suddenly screamed and lost consciousness. The second princess put away the magic wings card in her hand and awkwardly patted the dust off her tiger skin case, saying cleverly, "Hello, big sister." It was an expert. Anna originally wanted to perform the scene of a magical girl descending from the sky to beat up the bad guy, but she did not expect that the bad guy had already been killed the moment she jumped out of the window. Mary clearly saw through Anna's intentions and immediately revealed a gentle smile. "You're a first-year student?" Anna rolled her eyes. "That's right." After that, she naturally became entangled with this valiant young lady. Until Mary rescued her childhood sweetheart from the pufferfish's hands, she had been following them. On the other side, the third Princess Anchi, who was wearing a teddy bear costume, made a tisk sound and happily ran off to another road. So the two little princesses went their separate ways. Keat was awakened by the fugu who had escaped. The two supported each other as they walked into the castle. Although the road was long, they did not stop there. At the same time, Dake had already reached the third floor from the second floor. During this time, he had gained a lot by relying on the little devil and Ibu-chan, but he did not encounter any more hidden ghosts, and only gained a lot of credits. On the first-year Aristocratic Academy's ranking list, his ranking began to rise steadily. This undoubtedly attracted the attention of White and Luo Boat. White immediately felt uneasy and rushed up to the third floor from the second floor. The ghosts on the third floor were generally stronger than those on the second floor, but they were still limited to the first tier of 1 to 3 stars. However, the 1-star salted fish no longer moved alone, and the 3-star ones had also increased in number. Dark had even seen a large group of specters roaming the corridors, draped in sheets. Considering the limited number of cards he had, Dake did not rashly provoke them. Instead, he took a detour and quietly crept up to the 4th floor. After going through the trial on the 2nd floor, Dake more or less understood the movement patterns of these ghosts. Thus, he combined the number and types of cards he had and formulated a new strategy. He was prepared for a big wave. Starting from the 4th floor of the castle, powerful 4-star ghosts began to appear. The 2-star and 3-star ghosts also began to form groups. From time to time, he could see students being chased around by groups of ghosts. Yes, just like now. Hearing the sound of a large number of ghosts rapidly approaching, Dake immediately hid in a small path. Immediately after, he saw a somewhat familiar upperclassman of the Aristocratic Academy running past, followed by a group of mummies. The mummies moved a little slower than normal people, but there was a witch riding a broom behind them, constantly casting spells to increase their speed. When the upperclassman ran past with a group of mummies like a train, Dake came out of the small path and quietly wiped his sweat. Then, he began to familiarize himself with the 4th floor of the castle. About 15 minutes later, Dake found an empty classroom in the corner of the 4th floor. It did not even have a desk or a chair. After confirming that there were no hidden ghosts in the classroom, Dake summoned Little Fiend and patted its cheek, solemnly saying, "I'm counting on you." Little Fiend was as sad as an old general about to rush to the battlefield. It said weakly, "No, can I change to another beast? Little demon beasts aren't of much use." Dake, it's not good to belittle yourself. Believe in yourself, you are the strongest. Little Fiend, all right. Then, Little Fiend flew out of the classroom, flying towards a group of zombies that it had discovered during its inspection. Zombies were even more terrifying than mummies. They either lacked a nose or eyes, or their intestines were exposed and dragged on the ground. Little Fiend grabbed a stone and threw it inside. The group of zombies standing by the window and basking in the moonlight all turned, their deep eyes staring at Little Fiend. Thus, a great battle began. Just a dozen or so zombies were not enough to satisfy Little Fiend's appetite. It continued to fly to its next destination, cleanly seducing a group of jack-o'-lantern swordsmen, and then summoned a group of red-hat goblins. At this time, Dake was quietly waiting in the classroom. He used his fingers to rub little Ivan's belly. After replenishing his mana, he summoned it. Save! X-13 accompanied by a gust of wind, Little Fiend charged into the classroom. The jack-o'-lantern swordsman closest to it slashed at it, almost chopping its head in half. "It's here." Dake's eyes focused and took out Bliss 3. Chapter 97. The entrance of the Jack Pumpkin executioners filled the empty classroom with a bit of liveliness. Dake stood by the window in the back row, leaving an escape route. The Bliss 3, in his hand, glowed faintly. Little Devil saved 13 people in 1 second, but in reality, it didn't charge towards Dake. Instead, it flew straight towards the window opposite the door, somersaulting in the air and rushing out of the window. The Jack Pumpkin executioner who chased after it crashed into the window with a bang. Half of his body was exposed, and he almost fell down. The few Jack Pumpkin executioners behind him also failed to break and crashed into each other with a pa-pa-pa. Little Devil flapped its wings outside the window and turned around to laugh. However, as soon as it started laughing, one of the Jack Pumpkin executioners threw his small wooden axe with all his might. Little Devil screamed and hurriedly dodged, but the tip of its wing was still grazed. Immediately, tears streamed down its face. It didn't dare to make any more waves. It maintained its distance and dodged left and right, continuing to attract the attention of the ghosts. Then, the red hat goblins and the zombies with broken limbs all squeezed in from the front door. In a situation where they couldn't touch Little Devil, the ghosts finally discovered Dake at the window in the back row and changed their target one after another. Remember the website, Vipcanshu. 6. The red hat goblins were the fastest and nimble. They screamed and swarmed forward. The Jack Pumpkin executioners and soldiers also fanned out and surrounded Dake, forcing him into a corner. It's about time. Seeing that the classroom was already filled with ghosts, Dake immediately raised Bliss 3. Just like the Statue of Liberty raising a torch, Bliss 3 shone brightly. Whether it was the ghosts, the walls, the floor, or the ceiling, everything was covered in a layer of ambiguous pink. All the ghosts under Bliss 3's illumination instantly froze. However, their underdeveloped brains didn't seem to be able to understand Bliss very well. Only some of the goblins made strange movements. Ivan, who was beside Dake's feet, became the target of Bliss 3's gaze. The moonlight from outside the window gathered slightly, and the Bliss emblem appeared on Ivan's forehead. Dake didn't wait for him to successfully evolve. Instead, he picked it up from the ground and tossed it into the horde of ghosts. Ivan was unlucky. While the ghosts were distracted, Doc slid from the window to the classroom door in an extremely comical manner. Then he dashed out of the door. Bang! The moment the door closed. From within came Moon Ibu's evolved meows, as well as the screams of Jack Pumpkin and Red Hat Goblin, as well as the helpless rage of the zombies. Through the window, he could see a black light coming out of the classroom. Inside the classroom, an extremely evil and terrifying black wave instantly erupted. Ultimate skill, Evil Wave, Wave of Evil, releases a terrifying aura filled with malice from the body to kill the opponent. Sometimes, it will cause the opponent to cower. Jack Pumpkin Swordsmen are 2 stars, Red Hat Goblins are 2 stars, and Zombies are 2 stars. A group of about 12 to 15 people, and a single person is worth 20 credits. I can earn about 720 to 900 credits in one go, which is equivalent to a week's worth of hard work under normal circumstances. Bliss 3 has a cooldown of 90 minutes, so we can do 2 more rounds before the dance party ends. And from the looks of it, a mere 2-star ghost isn't enough to satisfy Moon Ibu's appetite. Dake carefully considered whether he should take the risk of climbing the castle in order to maximize his benefits. The door behind him was suddenly slammed open. Moon Ibu made a meow sound and pounced on him, hugging his face and licking it. Okay, be good. Dake helplessly propped up one of its front legs and poked its head inside. He saw dozens of candy, biscuits, and desserts floating in the large classroom. He hurriedly called the little devil to pack them up. His final score was 860. Adding to the credits he had earned earlier, he easily broke the 1,000 mark. Dake got a big bag from somewhere and stuffed all the snacks inside. Then, like Santa Claus, he carried the gifts and continued forward. Moon Ibu's status could still be maintained for a long time, so he needed to make full use of it. Those 3-star ghosts weren't Moon Ibu's match at all. A shadow ball was an enemy, and if he didn't have enough magic, he just had to dive into the moonlight and there would be another good Ibu. It was just that Moon Ibu really couldn't be controlled. Every time, he would have to wait for the ghosts to pounce on him before he was forced to counterattack. This put Dake in a dangerous situation, painful but happy at the same time. In the end, after Moon Ibu killed a 4-star ghost for the first time, Bliss 3's effect ended. Dake's credits also rose to 1230. Without a doubt, he was at the top of the first-grade aristocrat academy. And the second place was Doran, who had lost to him in a duel between classes. Doran was still bragging about being first in class 15 minutes ago. He didn't think that in the blink of an eye he would be caught up, and in the blink of an eye, the gap between them would be pulled apart. It's Dake, then it's fine. Under the gaze of his friends, Doran casually brushed past it, gritting his teeth in his heart. It was a coincidence. White, who was still on the 3rd floor of the castle, relied on the strength of Troll to be unstoppable. He repeatedly charged through the corridors, quickly harvesting credits. Because of Luo Boat's Ratman cyborg pulling monsters, his speed wasn't slow. After an hour and a half of hard work, he relied on steady fighting to earn credits that he himself might not have earned in an entire semester. Now, he was ranked second in the first grade rankings. First place was a student from the Magic Institute. Smart people could always think of all kinds of ways to earn more. It wasn't strange for the Magic Institute to be ranked first. Although White was somewhat unwilling, every time he opened the first grade Aristocrat Academy's rankings, his mood would be at ease. But this time, his eyelids suddenly jumped. Dake, who was originally at the bottom of the rankings, had actually shot up to first place. And his total credits were actually only a little less than his own. Turning back to look, sure enough, Dake was ranked third in the first grade rankings. What did he do? White suddenly roared. Fortunately, after that, Dake's credits slowed down, allowing him to regain his calm. But with a large number of hunts, the number of ghosts on the second and third floors had gradually decreased. In a situation where he hadn't encountered a single ghost for a few minutes, White had no choice but to take the risk and go up to the fourth floor in order to obtain more credits. At this time, Dake had already reached the fifth floor. There were more 4-star ghosts on the fifth floor, as well as hidden 5-star ghosts. Most of the third grade students were gathered on the fifth floor. Dake's goal this time was to trigger the hidden ghosts. During Bliss 3's cooldown, he would rely on Kettle to kill as many bosses as possible and obtain the core materials. But not long after he walked on the fifth floor, he suddenly discovered that there was an additional bear behind him. Chapter 98. The red panda followed behind him stealthily. When he abruptly turned his head, Little Bear immediately hid in a small path at the side. But with its short legs, it couldn't run very fast. It looked very funny. "It's a person," Dake complained silently. It was most likely someone wearing a bear-skin suit. He didn't know if it was a first-year or second-year student. But judging from its height, it shouldn't be too old. "Stop following me," Dake said from afar. Then, he turned around and continued walking. However, after taking a few steps, the sound of footsteps came from behind him again. He couldn't help but frown. He turned around and asked, "So, is there a reason why you're following me?" The little bear froze. Then, it suddenly raised its hand and cried, "Wah!" "Dake, how old are you?" Little Bear, 11. Dake, Little Bear, squinting eyes face. Dake's face darkened. He crossed his arms and said, 11. "So are you Anna or Anchi?" Little Bear, Anna. Dake, Anchi. Little Bear, Anna. Dake, forget it. Where's your sister? Anchi, the third princess, hopped over to Dake and said pretentiously, "Trick or treat." Dake then threw the bag of candy he was carrying to her. Anchi caught it instinctively. Her hand sank and it almost slipped. "What's this?" Doc revealed a trace of a smile. "The candy you wanted. Okay, this bag of candy is yours now. Go play with your own things. Don't cause trouble for me." Dake was naturally very happy to get rid of the annoying candy. In the royal kingdom, he was the son of a duke and had known the 3 princesses since he was young. Just like how little kids like to run around behind their big sisters, Dake used to stick to Princess Elisha when he was young, but that was a long time ago. After all, they were at least 6 years apart. When Dake was just starting to understand things, the first princess was already busy with her studies. After that, the ones who played with him were the twin princesses who were 1 year younger. Because the second Princess Anna was born with abundant magic power, her magic power suddenly went out of control, causing the toys around her to float up and hit Dake's head. Hence, Dake gave her the nickname Old Witch. After that, there was nothing after that. The relationship between Dake and Anna became very bad, and so did the relationship with Anchi. When they were about 7 years old, they had a complete falling out. After that, Dake became more and more naughty, and the princesses became more and more naughty. In the blink of an eye, 5 years had passed. They didn't expect to meet again outside of public places in the corridor of the Shang Malian castle. Dake sighed. And Chi had already put the candy bag on the ground and was excitedly untying the rope to check it. "Hey, Dake," and Chi suddenly said. Dake replied casually, "Yes." And Chi said again, "How do you have so much candy? I'll follow you and help you pick up the candy, okay?" Dake said, "No." And Chi said excitedly, "Then it's a deal." Dake ignored her. While she was indulging in the magical candy, he took a step forward and ran away quickly. The teddy bear bag was clumsy to begin with. And Chi wanted to chase after the despicable Dake when she saw him running away. However, she accidentally kicked the candy bag to the ground, and a large amount of candy fell and rolled all over the ground. An ominous aura suddenly appeared in the air. Dake, who had just run a short distance, suddenly stopped and listened carefully. He heard a voice from afar. The voice was getting closer and clearer. "Where's my teddy bear? Did anyone see my teddy bear?" Doc turned his head abruptly, only to see an oversized ragdoll bear poking out half of its body from the other side of the pitch-black corridor. The teddy bear was 3 meters tall, and its button-like eyes were emitting a ghostly green soul fire. Its skin was pieced together with pieces of cloth of various colors, and a dark aura was constantly seeping out from the seams. If that was all, it wouldn't be too scary. However, half of its body was a pale skeleton with bits of skin and flesh hanging on it. "Did you see my teddy bear?" The hoarse voice seemed to drill into one's bones, making one tremble uncontrollably. Somewhere in the castle, Professor Lily Laplace was lying on the sofa and blowing bubbles. Suddenly, he jumped up like a fish. "No way! That kind of mechanism can be triggered?" Professor Lily instantly woke up and quickly covered herself with a card. Her whole body suddenly became illusory. Then, the dragonfly wings on her back flapped, and she flew directly through the wall to the 5th floor of the castle. She wasn't panicking, but curious. Who's so lucky to be able to trigger this? Whoa! When Angie turned around, she quickly covered her mouth with her hand. A little spirit that looked like a griffin poked its head out of the gap in her little bear leather case. However, Anchi rolled her eyes and stuffed the elf sent by Ertiai's principal back into the bag. Then, she screamed in panic. In short, it was a great dolphin sound. However, as soon as she screamed, she saw a flash in the corner of her eyes. The golden-haired young man in luxurious clothes was completely different from what she remembered. He had already swept past her and rushed toward the terrifying zombie teddy bear without any fear. "I've searched high and low for it, only to find it by chance." Dake suppressed the joy in his heart. A magic elf card appeared between his 2 fingers. He still had some confidence in dealing with this kind of hidden monster that appeared alone. However, from the sound of the zombie teddy bear, it seemed to be coming for Anchi. Could it be that the mechanism that triggered it was the teddy bear and the candy? Or was it the teddy bear scattering the candy on the ground incident? He couldn't figure it out for the time being. But was it important? It wasn't important. Doc stopped abruptly. The magic elf card between his 2 fingers swiped across his chest. Magic summoning. A little tortoise-like magic elf appeared between the man and the bear. Anchi, who had stopped screaming, looked at the little tortoise with a red shell and yellow skin. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "Is this Dake's magic elf? Why does it look so lame?" At the same time, the griffin-like elf squeezed out from between her fingers again. However, it blinked and suddenly stopped moving. A little elf popped its head out from the ceiling like a ghost and blinked at it. "Found it, my little bear." The zombie teddy bear ignored Hoo-Hoo and Dake. It stared at the 3rd princess in the teddy bear costume with shining eyes. It started running without warning. Its pale skeleton was surrounded by a black aura. It looked ferocious and evil. Chapter 99. The hidden monster on the 5th floor of the castle should be at least a 5-star monster, right? Dake wasn't a brave and fearless person. His calmness was based on his confidence in his magic guide sprite. No matter if it was a 5-star, 6-star, or 7-star monster, he had the power to fight. Kettle Kettle's small body contained an unbelievable amount of power. Even though it had many weaknesses, as long as it was used well, it would be invincible. Let's test the strength of a 5-star hidden monster first. Dake took out 2 other cards from his card pack, but he wasn't in a hurry to summon them. Ba ba ba. In order to attract the attention of the zombie ragdoll bear, Kettle Kettle tried its best to provoke it. Website: https://m Vipkanchu. VIP. However, its body was too small. The zombie ragdoll bear didn't care about it at all, only dashing forward with large steps. With just a single step, he actually leaped over its head. Dake's face darkened, and he hurriedly summoned illusory magical beast, Ibu. Ibu turned solid in the air and barked at it. This barking was clearly more effective than Kettle Kettle's insect chirping. The zombie ragdoll bear stopped and raised its fan-sized paw to slap Ibu. If this slap landed, Ibu would definitely turn into light. Luckily, it was nimble enough to dodge it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Dake counted down the cooldown of a normal summoning spell and immediately started chanting. Another 5 seconds later, Pride 2 was instantly activated, and a dark golden light shot towards Ibu. Ibu, who had successfully lured the zombie ragdoll bear, suddenly had a change in his expression. Although there were no other changes to its appearance other than the addition of a crest on its head, its inner qualities were completely different. Eye of the Circle. Dake gave the command without hesitation. Evie's eyes suddenly lit up with a dark golden light. A kind of condescending arrogance was transmitted into the heart of the zombie ragdoll bear through their eyes. In that instant, even a 5-star monster like the zombie ragdoll bear couldn't avoid Ibu's Eye of the Circle. That arrogance, as if it was sitting on the stars and looking down on the world, made the zombie ragdoll bear feel extremely defeated. In an instant, it lost all hope of attacking. Ivan landed on the ground, panting slightly. However, the effects of circular pupil didn't last for long. After the zombie ragdoll bear regained its senses, it suddenly flew into a rage out of humiliation. It opened its mouth and roared angrily. It finally gave up on its little bear and set its sights on Ivan, who had given it endless humiliation. This was obviously what Dake wanted to see. Immediately after, the zombie ragdoll bear raised its right claw and clawed at the left chest of the skeleton, pulling out the beating black heart from the chest. Then, under Dake's perplexed gaze, it turned its heart into a bomb and threw it at Ivan. Ultimate skill: Black Heart Bomb. Boom! In the dim corridor, the sound of the explosion echoed for a long time. The zombie ragdoll bear patted its chest and roared excitedly. However, after the dust settled, what appeared in front of them was a slightly weakened Kettle. Clearly, the Black Heart Bomb's attack power had exceeded Kettle Kettle's defense. This zombie ragdoll bear belonged to the top category even among the 5-star ghosts. Ivan, who appeared behind Kettle Kettle, patted its chest. Its face twitched slightly. It had just used imitation, but the imitation skill required it to dig out its heart to use. This was really difficult for Chong-Hu. BZZT. Kettle Kettle provoked it again. This time, it finally succeeded in attracting the zombie ragdoll bear's aggro. The zombie ragdoll bear's attention was completely focused on Kettle Kettle. Dake finally let out a sigh of relief. It's done. In his opinion, Kettle Kettle's biggest weakness was its small size and slow speed. Even if it was summoned in the arena, the opponent could ignore it. However, once the opponent stopped ignoring it, it would be completely finished. The zombie ragdoll bear in front of them was no doubt a perfect example. When it raged and rushed towards Kettle Kettle, Kettle Kettle immediately used equal share, reducing the zombie ragdoll bear's strength by half. The attack, which had originally exceeded his defensive capabilities, suddenly became neither painful nor itchy. The zombie ragdoll bear's subsequent full stomp was completely like a kitten stomping on milk. After withstanding the stomp, Kettle Kettle immediately used power trick, to exchange its own defense and attack power. Attack 2, 200 defense. With a full 2200 attack power, Kettle Kettle had a counterattack ability that surpassed that of a 3-star card. Its tentacles curled into a fist, and it smashed the zombie ragdoll bear's left leg. Crack! The pale white bone leg immediately cracked like glass. The bones that were already rotten could no longer support the zombie ragdoll bear's cumbersome body. It was instantly crushed. Without its left leg, the zombie ragdoll bear fell down with a roar. Ivan pounced over like a gust of wind, biting down on that button-like eye that was still burning with soulfire. Then, he raised his head and tore it off. The zombie ragdoll bear, which had lost its only eye, was no longer able to cause any trouble. 2 minutes later, this 5-star hidden ghost was completely eliminated. Credits plus 100. Ibu-chan leaped up and caught the gift box with her mouth. She then delivered it to Dark. Dake took the gift box and patted its head. Ibu-chan turned its head away arrogantly. Squeak! What is this? Dake opened the gift box and saw a black button. It reminded him of the button eyes of the zombie ragdoll bear. No matter what, since it's an item dropped by a 5-star hidden spirit, it must be something extraordinary. Dake carefully put it into the interlayer of his card bag before turning around. She happened to see Little Bear sneaking away with the bag of candy on his back. Dark had a smile on his face. When he rushed past En-Chi just now, he had actually noticed the little griffin sprite. Since she was protected by Professor A. Ertie's sprite, there was no need to worry about her safety. Only after Angie thought that she had slipped away without anyone noticing did Dark continue on his way. He specifically targeted the 4-star ghosts that were alone. While accumulating points, he also relied on high-intensity battles to gain combat experience. For the junior students, the masquerade ball had a lot of extra value. In short, he gained a lot. Hee. Professor Li continued to observe Dake for a while before sneaking back. The masquerade ball continued. Apart from the squid and the pufferfish, the other members of the church's operation was quite smooth. There were already a few couples who had disappeared without a trace. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.